Hey now. Welcome to episode 127 of Killer POV. I'm one of your hosts, Rob G. from Blumhouse.com.
That's like 4 years of podcasting, maybe 7 years.
Yeah.
12 years of podcast.
My God,
12.
we've been doing this since we were teens.
Smokes. Yeah, that is Elric Kane. What's your shirt, Elric Kane?
This is Cavity Colors.
Super cool.
Videodrome.
Yeah, it is.
Long live the new flesh, baby.
Yeah, man. Cavity Colors.
I had this
Shout
one
out.
from a while ago. I've had this for a long time. Wait, he gave us all those shirts.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
still love my Halloween 3 one. It's brilliant.
Owner of the Halloween 3 t-shirt from Cavity Colors is Rebekah McKendry, editor-in-chief of Blumhouse.com. Welcome.
I don't fit in that one anymore, but
right.
Not at the moment, but in 2 months.
You have a son
I got
who will
2
wear it one
months,
day.
and then I will fit back into my brilliant Cavity Colors shirt. They need to
Yeah.
make maternity. Get on that, boys.
Yeah, I'm surprised they
there
don't
we
do that
go.
for horror. They
No
should.
one makes
probably-
maternity t-shirts.
There's got to be some
Everyone's spending
company
all their
that
time
does.
making ugly sweaters where they could be making a ton of money in kids' horror clothes.
This
That's
If
what
you
I
just
do.
ugly-
even look to find like a maternity Ramones shirt, you can't find it.
Yeah.
So.
This ugly sweaters thing is out of control, but
Well,
that's
because
a
the
whole
problem
nother
is they're not
story.
that ugly. Like all the, I just saw the Fright Rags ones. It was like Jaws, and I'm
want
like,
the
that's a
Jaws
beautiful
one.
sweater.
Yeah.
Calling it ugly seemed off. I kind of want those real ugly, the ones that were from a different era.
Right.
I can never negotiate buying sweaters because we live in Los Angeles and a
it's a
cold
little
day
weird.
is like 60 and
But
it
yeah.
will be like 80 within an hour. And yeah,
But you might have to leave one day, like leave town to a snowy place.
I don't leave.
and bring a
Remember,
sweater.
we're going to go see Carpenter play in Oslo.
in Iceland.
I treat
We gotta
LA
trek.
like Cemetery Man,
yeah.
where there's nothing else beyond
outside.
this. I
It
don't
gets
go
cold here.
past this.
Pretty much true.
So what have we've got an exciting episode later.
Yeah, we really do. We have a guest who is just someone we all really like, have wanted on since the beginning,
He's
Right.
just
and is
an
just a
awesome
super
guy.
person.
Yeah, we're a great
Super
guy.
dude.
Big
Excited
listener and
about it.
supporter of the show and a big supporter of Jump Cook Cafe. He was always there.
And there's a clue. Last week we talked about one of the scripts he had in
Which we'll
production
ask
with our
him
guest
about.
Stephen C.
Yes,
Milligan.
we
We'll
did.
ask him about that
I
one.
may or may not have read the first half of it before I came here today.
Hey,
But I
and
can't say anything about
it because of the franchise he's involved in, it gives us the opportunity to do a topic I can't believe we haven't done in 126 episodes.
Pie fucking.
Yes,
Pie
fucking. No, best on-screen deaths.
Yeah.
How cool is that?
Yeah, how far down the rabbit hole do you go though researching that? Because I
I
was
know.
like getting lost in circles going, Jesus.
It's gonna be epic, but
that'll be fun.
I have a little bit.
I
of
miss
order
our
to
topics.
it.
I must admit,
Yeah.
I miss
Yeah.
doing some topics.
I think
lately.
I have a little order to how we're going to do it.
Okay, all
But
right.
we'll see what our guest has to say.
Whole bunch.
But before that, movies.
Yeah.
I've only seen a couple, but
well, let's
Elric.
start with TV. Did everyone finish Jessica Jones?
Yes.
No, I
you're
still
not
have 2
done.
episodes to
Okay.
go, so nobody spoil it.
It's freaking awesome.
It is
and the
great.
last couple episodes were just so great.
I know.
And the characters are good. And
Yeah.
It's just a good show.
oh, I'm excited
Shout
to
out,
finish
shout
it.
out to Scott Reynolds
I like
for
it very
writing
much.
episode 10, which is one of my favorites of the entire
That one
run.
was wonderful.
It's the Kilgrave specific one that takes
Yeah.
place at Jessica's house.
That's a really good one.
And
the last couple
I think
were
he
really
knocked
good
that one
too.
out of the park. So,
Yeah. No, just great character. And so the other show we've talked about a little bit, just quickly, Leftovers ended like on an absolute high. Great second season. Best second season. Like next to Hannibal, it's the other best second season I've seen following up to a decent first season, but not excellent.
My
Right.
God, I want that to go
Something
someplace
special.
besides HBO Go.
Yeah, I don't know
Because,
what's gonna happen
it's
next
not
with
on
that show.
Amazon.
It
It's
might
not
be
going to be
done.
on Hulu because HBO tends to be elitist like that. But I have not, because I don't have HBO and I can't rationalize buying HBO just for
Right.
that show. But the suspense is killing me, and I'm going to end up
Buy it
doing
for Game
it.
of Thrones.
Well, you just mentioned
I
Hannibal.
usually get that other
Yeah.
places.
You mentioned Hannibal. The third and final season has just come out this week
Mm-hmm.
on Blu-ray DVD. I think this is the ideal time if you've been wanting to check it out. Now's the time because you have 3 seasons you could plow through, and quite frankly, on Amazon the prices keep dropping. I bought it for $14.99. That was the last I checked.
Wow.
It was $15
whole
for the
season.
entire third season. I think the second season was like $9.99 last week.
you
last
got
time I
San
checked.
Andreas like super cheap too, right?
Yeah, but that was a lightning deal that I took advantage of
Oh,
because
man.
I'm a weird, I'm a consumer that looks out for that kind of stuff.
fine.
But no, so I recommend keep your eyes peeled on Amazon. In particular, I go through Blu-ray.com, blue-ray.com,
Yep.
because every day, if you go in best deals, you'll see things that are marked down, and usually they're only marked down for a day or two.
Yeah.
So I keep seeing all 3 seasons of Hannibal pop up at a really cheap price. So now's the time to definitely catch up on that
great
one.
show, too.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
there have been some good TV. I would start with, just because I can't remember if we've all seen it. I don't know if you saw it yet, but Krampus.
Yeah, because most people seem to enjoy it from what I gathered.
And most of the criticism, and when I read criticism, it's usually, the kind of somewhat founded criticism, which isn't even that bad.
Right.
You know what I mean? It seems to be, the amazing part is let's celebrate because it did well.
Yes.
Hell yeah.
Starting there, because that's just
Absolutely.
important across the board for if we want to see decent studio horror. The only way to see good studio horror is if they make a lot more studio horror.
Yeah.
Because if they only make 3 a year, they're not going to all be good. You know?
Well, I make this argument. It was a very meticulously and well thought out release because there's zero competition. There's
Right.
like nothing else that came out. I mean, they were competing against the Hunger Games
and
movie, which
Creed
has
a
been
little
out
bit,
for,
yeah.
Creed has been out for a few weeks.
Yeah.
So up until Star Wars, there's nothing holiday themed.
Yeah.
So I think it was timing, and also Krampus in the last 2 years or so has really started to kind of come up in the public subconscious. Like, we know about it because we're weirdos and we research things like the anti-claws. But I think in the general public, it's starting to be a thing.
It's become like a viral thing. I mean, I definitely saw that Krampus parade video got passed around, not even to me because I'm in the horror circle, like my mom sent it to me.
Yeah.
And we've definitely seen him come up I've seen him come up in a lot of TV shows. We'll actually have an article going up on our site next week about Krampus appearances in TV shows, which have just grown exponentially over the past 2 years. So,
Well, and I also think the
it's been on
comedian,
the
the casting of like all these kind of big
Oh,
comedians.
yeah. That was a big part
Was
of
a
it.
way to kind of soften it so it's not like you're going to just see a horror film. You're going to see something that's also funny no matter what. You're going to see these people who are going to make you laugh.
And that's the key because Ken Hanley from Fangoria posted, "Oh, horror fans, you did great this weekend." Now, I don't want to downplay or diminish the horror audience, all of which are listening. If you're a horror fan,
every single one of them
you that's
is
listening.
with us tonight.
But I replied to him saying it wasn't the horror audience; it was the general audience.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
That's the thing. It's like if every horror fan in the world went to go see it, it might have done okay. But the point is, the reason it did great is because this is one of those rare, unique cases that went outside the genre to the general public. And my test is always like I said, my older cousins that don't give a shit about horror. Krampus was the movie that they hired babysitters and went to go see.
Yeah.
And that's it. And it's
That's gonna
probably
drop
because what you
$100 on it,
said. They saw,
it's gonna
the
be funny as well.
trailer.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, I like those guys, those comedians.
Yeah.
This should be fun, Now
that said, as a film, did I like it? I did like it a lot, actually, and I had a really good time watching it. And it was pretty much like what I thought it was going to be. Like there was nice little surprises. There was a couple of creatures that were particularly great. Jack in the Box is just one of the best creations of the year, in my opinion. Better than Krampus, you know what I mean? Like more impressive, more like, whoa, I didn't see that coming. And it's the kind of like my only criticism. I called you straight after. My only criticism was I could have had another 30 minutes, and that's probably a good criticism to have after finishing well. And it wasn't 30 minutes
Elric
at the
said
end.
It should be longer.
Yeah, it was longer. It was more. It wasn't so much at the end. It's not like I felt because the ending's kind of perfect. It's
that I don't agree.
It's dark.
I like the ending. I don't agree with you saying it should be longer.
Yeah. Well, no. What I want longer is I actually could have used, for me personally, I could have had like 20 minutes up front and just enjoyed getting to know people even more, and just which is a good sign. It means I liked the world that they placed the film in. Is it Gremlins like masterpiece? No, it's not. But I feel like I actually feel like if he got a chance to make a sequel, now that it's been successful, now that he doesn't have to like prove anything, like he could just make it. I bet you he could make something that would be on that kind of par,
right?
Like a Gremlins 2, a Krampus 2 kind of thing. But I enjoyed it a lot, and I think people should definitely check it out.
But keep in mind, if you're a 12-year-old, this will be your Gremlins. Like, but I mean, if you have that mentality, like, I know a lot of people are like, it's not as good as Gremlins, and I'm like, yeah, but dude, you're in your 30s now. Like, you're to a young kid, it's going to have that impact on them.
It's impossible for me to say right on that, but I would say that I feel like that's what I mean by the lack of not enough story. I feel like even though some nice beats, with the kid writing it, the thing about Gremlins is it really goes deep into that kind of character. You really feel for them at the start, and it kind of, I don't know. It's just again, you're right. I don't really have a perspective on what it'd be like to be 10 watching it, but I enjoyed it. Good fun. But I called you because the most mind blowing part.
This is amazing.
This is up there with
me about this too.
My Thing story, but this is even crazier. So
Thing story.
And this won't mean anything to except for like the 3 listeners who listen in New Zealand people I know. But
we might have 4.
We have a few. Danger, call out to you, my friend. But no, there's when the credits rolled, I wasn't paying that much attention, and I looked up to see Krampus's name, who played Krampus, and it was a familiar name to me, and I was like, must be just another person. His name was Luke Hawker, and I looked up on my phone, and my mind has, in my entire life watching a movie, had never blown more than this moment, because it was the guy who'd been in like all the indie films I made in New Zealand. He'd been the lead in 2 of them, and he had appeared as guest stars in 2 others, and he looks like us. He's like a little, kind of spindly white guy who like does not look like Krampus at all. Krampus, this giant big monster.
So
and
did like Weta do the effects?
I don't know. I still
How
haven't
did he
found
get
out, but
involved?
I straight away went on Facebook, and of course everyone was congratulating him on being great in Krampus. His brother and him were definitely into, his brother especially did a lot of makeup and probably did a lot of the creature design on Lord of the Rings. I don't know about what Luke did because he was an actor, but mostly indie stuff. And then he appeared in Avatar. He appeared in some, but I didn't know. I think the cool thing about it was, had I watched this movie going, oh, cool, Luke's in this, it would have completely changed my experience of watching the movie. Like seeing this giant, Krampus creature and then thinking your friend is that character would have been really weird. And so it was really cool to kind of have that discovery afterwards, especially when social media and Facebook usually keep you so connected to people. But there's someone I haven't seen in 8 years, because I've been here. But it was really fun. And so my guess is, yes, either they did the effects in New Zealand or maybe the whole thing was shot there. I haven't looked that part up yet. I would assume maybe the effects,
Wow.
I don't know. But either way, it was very fun. That was a very fun little just kind of like bizarre little moment, because I didn't usually like Evil Dead, the show is shot in New Zealand, and I recognize every episode. I recognize a character in it. Every single episode. In fact, the book dealer was married to an ex of mine, and so I was watching that one going,
he's really kind of making it sound like they all know each other.
Well, it is,
New Zealand,
look, it's
probably.
a small place, if you're in those industries. But this one didn't have any tips like that. So until I saw that name, I would never have thought, I mean, that's one of my problems with the Evil Dead show, actually. It's like some of the wide shots where they're driving down a street. I'm like, yeah, that's the New Zealand countryside. Like, it looks like a farm. I'm like, that is not Michigan. I'm sorry, guys. But whatever. Hey, it's TV. What are you going to do? Anyway, so Krampus.
So you didn't love it, but you liked it.
I liked it a lot, though. Like to be short of love is just, while I'm watching, I just am fully entertained by it. It's just, it's also not totally my subgenre. So, but from good Christmas horror fun.
Yeah.
Highly recommend it.
Okay.
I'm seeing a matinee on Friday
Great.
with a whole group of people. So, I'm pretty psyched.
That's probably a
to
good
see
way
it.
to see it.
Yeah.
I'm
What else
saving
you got?
my annual fiesta for next week, which is my Silent Night, Deadly Night 5.
Oh, you're up to part 5?
5. Yes, this is my last journey.
The Toy Maker.
For the last 3, since we've been doing Killer POV
Well, are you
every
not going to
year.
revisit the 6th one, the one that's Stephen Miller? Because I want to rewatch it now.
But is it technically 6th? Or is
Yeah,
it?
totally. I think
they
so.
don't call but they don't call
I
it.
think it's a remake of the first one, right?
No, but it's not.
Yeah,
it's not the
it's not
same
really
plot or any of the characters.
Yeah,
so
it is-
I
it
just
is a
consider it a
completely
But isn't it
different
also
deal.
called just Silent? It's not even called Silent Night, Deadly Night, right?
But
Silent Night.
it is
But
a
I mean-
continuation. I mean, they got rights to do it.
Yeah.
Okay, well then next
It
year.
is
That's
part
why
of the
I only do one a
franchise.
year, so
Okay.
don't get me carried away here.
All right,
Last year I had to survive Yasna's one, and that was not the best. I'm not expecting
This
much out of the
one
Toy
is,
Maker.
This one's directed by one of your friends, though.
No, this one is
It's
no
a
3 is
hair-
Monty.
Oh, Monty is
Monty
3.
did 3. Our first year I did
5
3.
is a hair better.
For the Yasna one was actually, had a couple moments there fun, but had nothing to do with Christmas. It's all about
Right.
witchcraft.
No, yeah.
And then 5, we'll see. I'm going to watch that next week. So
It's interesting. It's fun.
Yeah, I've got that to get through. So other things I watched, just quickly, a couple others. A really cool movie that was on TCM that is a Twilight Time release. I'd never seen it, called Experiment in Terror.
Okay.
And it's not a horror film. It's like a strangler type guy calling you and making death threats if you don't rob a bank. And it has like 2 or 3 scenes like that are so freaking great that I would encourage people to buy this. Then it's kind of very procedural in between that. It's Glenn Ford as the main FBI agent. He won't tell you who the killer is or the bad guy because it's kind of kept secret in the film. And it's really good. It's definitely going to go on for Rupert Pupkin. He does the Discoveries list. It's definitely going to be a Discovery this year because it's a really beautifully shot. It was Blake Edwards just before he made like the Pink Panther movies. Mm-hmm. So he hadn't really made any movie in the thriller realm. Every film of his has got like a light touch, like what's that film 10, where the girl's running the beach and all those films that he makes. This is totally different. This is like the dark scenes are kind of Polanski-ish. It's all dark expressionist lighting, really cool. The opening scene's just basically a girl coming home from work and a guy basically coming behind her in her garage and making threats and telling her what she's going to do, and it's really intense. So that was a cool one, and you can see that on Twilight Time. And then I watched 2 new films because I'm kind of
Trying to get your list together.
Yeah, I'm trying to go through all the list, and it's fun because some of the ones I hadn't paid for are now popping up on Netflix.
Yep.
So these 2 are both new to Netflix, so if you could check them out. First was one called Some Kind of Hate, which is the director who started the whole Death Wave article stuff that all began. This is one of the movies that I was very aware when I was watching it that somebody... Because some movies are just shit. Like, I'll tell you, honestly, I think some movies are just bad. A bad movie is a bad movie. Some movies you're watching and you just know isn't for you, but you're actually, while you're watching, you're like, you know what? Somebody is watching this and this is their favorite movie of the year.
Yep.
It has that ability. Like, I did not like this movie. Technically, I thought it was really well made, so it's not a bad movie at all by any technical standard. Editing's great. Cinematography's great. There's something in the story in the first, 15, 20 minutes that I just knew it wasn't really for me, and the longer it went, there was some cool touches, some nice horror moments, some good casting. There's just something about it I did not like, but I knew the whole way. I was like, oh, you know what? Somebody who has like maybe a little younger, a little more angry might be going, oh yeah, this is my movie. This is the horror movie of the year for them, for someone, not me. So I'm, you know, I say for me, it's a pass on some kind of hate, but I think somebody else might really dig it. The other one is, Mickey Keating, who makes 17 movies a year at the moment. He's already like, this is 3 movies ago now, and Pod just came out. Yeah, because he's got the new one coming to Sundance.
Pod like in
Carnage
October,
Park.
And it was like just released then.
No, he's got one coming to Sundance, Carnage Park, and then he's got Darling that came out. And a lot of people have told me. So if Mickey's listening, I don't know if he listens or not. You know, just know that a lot of people have told me I'm going to really like Darling. I did not love Pod. I thought
when I said that, you guys were like, you know, he listens.
Oh, I don't. Yeah, he might. No, you know what? It was about it. This is I don't know if this is a compliment or not, but the guy who did This American Life, I can't remember what it is, Ira Glass, he did this really cool thing that Josh Forbes, who also listens and was on our show, passed on to me to send to my students. It was all about like, the one thing you know about yourself is like, you know your taste. And if you have good taste, like eventually you can make something good. You just keep making stuff. And as long as your taste is good, eventually you're going to make good stuff. You keep doing it. And I remember, and when I was watching Pod, I kept thinking about that because the reference points of what I can tell he's like, not so much reference direct, but the kind of movies that are inspiring him are the same kind of movies that inspire me for a lot of, for you know, the most part. But I could admit it felt kind of with Training Wheels to me a little bit in terms of the aesthetic. You know, there's choices that I thought were really smart, but I just never was in the characters, never believing. For me personally, again, I think this will be one that quite a lot of people I think will have a good time with. It's a little bit of a slow burn, but it's like, you know, there's a lot of yelling and shouting and characters, and there's like, you know, it could be an alien kind of thing, and it's, you know, very secluded. There's a little bit of a Fessenden cameo at the end.
Oh, cool.
You know?
I did think that the creature effects on that one were really good, done by our friend Jeff Farley.
Oh yeah, no, I mean the creature itself looked really good. It's just something off by hair, you know.
Yeah.
That's it exactly.
But I definitely watching that one, I was like, yeah, I'll watch your next movie. You know, and I have a feeling I'll like it more.
No,
you know?
it was a very competent film start.
Yeah, for someone
like
making movies cheaply.
Film. Yeah, and considering, you know, that it is 3 people in a house for the entire fucking movie, you know,
and it's all characters, you know, like
it is.
Like Lauren Ashley Carter, who I really like in most roles. For
I
some
love her
reason,
in
this one I
Jugface.
didn't like her because she's yelling a lot and I didn't believe it.
Okay.
You know, but she, you know, again.
I put both of those on my queue, so I'm going to try to watch them.
And I guarantee you, if people are listening right now, some of you guys will actually, these will be movies you really dig this year, and you'll write to me saying, hey, you're wrong. That's good.
I've had people tell me that
wrong.
Some Kind of Hate was like their favorite film of the year. And I have to say, I liked the first half of it. It's one of those movies like Goodnight Mommy, where midway through there's a dramatic shift.
Tonal change.
Yeah. And the first half, I was like, oh, this is intense. And then midway through, I was like, oh, you went there. But it's also, I will say about Some Kind of Hate, it's a beautifully shot movie.
Yeah.
Like it's bone white.
That guy, okay, so the DP, I was looking him up, and his name just literally slipped my mind, but he shot like what are the movies that Josh made? Contracted, he shot those movies and stuff. He really good DP, but he just directed a movie and is playing just at the Pasadena Playhouse this week, but it has the guy from The Sacrament, the old guy, as the lead. And I think it's like, not concussion, but the word
Gene Jones,
where you forget things.
Oh, Dementia.
Dementia.
Yeah.
That's his film. So that's his first directorial film.
Peter
and Morgan's
is in that.
Yes.
Gotcha.
So I would love to see that
Christina
before the end of the
Cleed,
year,
too.
if possible. I'd like to include that in our list if we get a chance. But yeah, so I looked him up, and I really looked up a lot of the things he shot recently, and I was like, on a technical level, he's really good DP.
All right.
So fingers crossed. Couple quick things. Just that's all the movies, but just a couple books I want to mention. I'm reading A Head Full of Ghosts right now, and it's really good. I mean, if no one's read that film, it was like that book. It was one of the ones I think it was like everyone was talking about this year as like one of the big releases. I haven't read horror stuff for a while. You know, just it's something I hadn't kind of gotten back into reading books. It was actually after our Dell episode. It kind of really.
Which A Head Full of Ghosts?
Oh,
Ghosts. Okay.
By is it Patrick Tremblay? Something Tremblay. I'm about 3/4 of the way through, but before that, I forgot to mention a couple weeks ago. Before that, I read Cold Skin. It was lent to me by Dick Grenner, and it's a really great it's more like almost a novella. It's quite short, set on a remote island where a guy comes to take over from a kind of weather keeper character for a whole year. You're going to be on this island, middle of nowhere, you know, it's probably like 50, 60 years ago. And there's a lighthouse there, and it's basically him and this lighthouse keeper, and then these creatures that attack every night. And it's really cool. And as soon as we posted that, Jeremy Gardner posted on Twitter, I've been wanting to make that a movie forever. And then somebody else said, somebody else had the rights, and it was fun to see. But it's if you're looking for a really good like Christmas read that's short, that would be a good one to go with. And I'm hoping to include more books as I read more again.
Cool.
Anyway, that's what I've been watching, catching up.
Bekah?
I was shooting this weekend, a project that will be announced in a couple
Congrats.
of weeks. So so I didn't get to watch as much
shoot.
as I
Making
usually
shit?
do. Yeah, Elric's
My child
kid was
ruined her
in
shoot.
it. Yeah, he didn't ruin it. He made it better.
Hey.
He giggled.
He literally changed the line
He
without
did,
and
because-
would not allow them to
He's
have
a
what they
diva.
wanted.
We were
pretty
like,
bad.
be serious, give me your angry face. And he would just giggle.
And he's like, I'm 4.
Yeah.
Go direct a tree.
And so then afterwards, I was like, you know what? That was kind of a sinister giggle.
It was
Let's
kind
go with it.
Yeah, it could work.
Yeah, it got sinister. I liked it. So yeah, I was there for like Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So I didn't get to watch as much as I usually do. What I did watch, I watched all 3 Xtro films.
Extra.
Oh, wow.
Extra.
All in a row?
Yeah, all in a row.
Number 1 rules.
Dennis Atherton's
Thank you, Dennis,
very
for making me watch
excited.
that in the end because I love that movie.
Because
Number
I've
one
been
is
telling
great.
him to for years, and he doesn't listen to me. So thank you.
Yeah, I would
for-
never have believed.
No. I'm like
He doesn't listen to
I'm
Bekah.
like your office wife. You don't
Yeah.
listen to a damn thing I say.
I just don't hear it.
I
That's the
know,
problem. My
right?
ear
I'm
is
like
deaf to
Charlie
it.
Brown's teacher in your ear. But yeah, so the first film, always a classic. I've loved that one from the start, but I really wanted to do kind of a whole franchise rehash for Blumhouse. And so I decided to venture into 2 and 3. 2 is Jan Michael Vincent, not at his
man.
best. Such a controversial film because, he was just completely plastered through the whole film and it was
Yes.
entirely clear.
He did that a lot in that era.
Yeah, it's a shame. It used to
And
be so good.
it really does shape the film because you can it's weird that you can see directing because usually if I'm watching a film, I applaud the directing if I don't see it, but you can see how the director is going out of his way
Cobble
to
shit
limit,
together, yeah.
to limit Jan Michael Vincent's involvements in scenes where like he'll say one line and then walk off
Yeah.
and then everyone else talks around
They
him.
also have nothing in common, these movies,
Yeah.
really. Like, they're so,
They're completely
different. It's a
different.
shame. But
And-
they have the same director.
Yeah.
You're like, that's so weird.
And then part 3, and they seem to get less competent as they go, which is weird.
remember if I
But
end
part
up,
3 is a
3.
little bit better than part 2. It's like slightly more competent, but it's still bad. And it's weird because as effects get cheaper and digital effects get cheaper, the effects get worse.
Yeah, totally.
So which I don't understand.
It's a
Throughout the
common
series?
problem.
Yeah, throughout
Like
the
as-
series,
oh,
they
gotcha.
get
It's because they give up on the cool practical, like, creatures.
They
go
do.
They probably
towards
get less
CGI.
money per movie.
Yeah, like Xtro, the creature effects are obviously amazing. Like that's what sells it. Like I have no idea what happens in the story.
I wish you had gone into birth watching the childbirth.
I know, right?
Like, how cool would that have been? Watching, because she has it in what, like an hour?
Yeah,
It's like she gets pregnant and has
she
a
gets
baby, and then
pregnant
like an hour. or
an
something.
hour later
I
it's
love
there,
that.
and
That's
it's
so
full
fun.
grown man, which
Yeah.
is just bizarre.
Creepy shit.
Well, I know Elric mentioned it when you originally saw the movie, but do you have the DVD of the first movie?
I do.
Watch the interview
yeah.
with the director because the director's interviewed on the first
And he's
movie.
very honest.
And all 3 movies, like, I don't know why you guys like any of these movies, but
Yeah.
he's like,
Well,
the first one I sort of did all right. He's like, the second one's awful. Third is just, a little better, but still awful.
But the first one has
he's
the Jaguar story.
Yeah.
The
which
Jaguar
is
story is amazing.
amazing.
Yeah.
The whole movie's pretty epic, but he's rumored to be making a 4th, which led me
wow.
to question why.
But an extra reboot, I would totally be into.
Yeah, if
like
it
just
was
one
like-
great modern movie with that whole original
Yeah.
idea.
A
remake,
I'd be all about it.
a little bit more linear so that it makes a little bit more sense. I would
Right.
love to see.
We need more extra.
Yeah,
I want
need
less
more
sense.
extra.
Don't listen to
Less
her.
sense,
more
more
under the
extra.
skin extra. Like, Jonathan Glazer to direct Extra. Boom!
Boom.
I've just
Wow.
created
Shit.
the greatest movie of
That's
the year
like
with Scarlett
the perfect
Johansson.
mashup right there.
I can't even imagine.
Got wood? Got
So
wood?
I watched and suffered through that.
Yeah.
And then after that, and this one, I have to say, like, if I watched one film this week, I'm glad this was it. I watched the Irish film The Hollow.
Yeah.
Which
On my
was
list.
fucking unbelievable.
That's cool.
I wasn't
Really?
expecting it to be.
Really good
I
creatures.
wasn't expecting to love it as much as I did. It's about a couple and their newborn son who move into this rural Irish farmhouse, and he's there to kind of research the trees because they don't really explain it yet, but you kind of understand that he's working for some logging company or something like that. And so he's researching the trees, and all the farms people in the other town farms around him and the other like rural houses keep saying like, you have to keep iron on your doors at all time. If you touch the trees, things will come out of the forest and hurt you. There's magical little creatures and imps
Kevin
that live in
Lehane
the forest.
lives in the forest.
Yeah.
He's one of the magical creatures.
And if you in any way mess with the forest, they'll come out and attack you. And the couple doesn't listen. And it turns out there's actually like shit in the forest. And the
Tell 'em no
creature,
more.
I'm not.
On the
I'm
plot.
stopping
No more.
right there.
So that's 2 out of 3 Killer POV stars. So this film might get all 3 if we'll
I
see.
will. No,
This-
it's,
We'll see.
Yeah.
The creature effects in it were by far the best I've seen, I would say, in years.
Yeah, it's a very believable world. Like the 2 protagonists aren't the most likable
No.
characters, but they are quite real. like, as in terms of modern couples. But it's a cool world. And I mentioned to you the other day, I forgot to say when I mentioned it, but like just to mention, like Irish horror, what's interesting about it is it's all the ones I've liked in the last couple of years, that the Canal, Grabbers, and Citadel all have creatures.
Yeah.
I mean, that's awesome.
That's
like
pretty
practical creatures, and like you're like, wow, like that's kind of ballsy for a horror cinema. And, and it also requires some money and fun, so it's cool to see all these movies coming out of that part of the world.
Yeah, I loved this one because it took kind of that magical Irish woodland fairy tale and made it like scary as shit.
Cool.
And these creatures were scary as shit.
That's why when I saw it, it reminded me a little bit of a Pumpkinhead feel, even though it's more than just not one. It's not one creature per se. Just the feeling of it's a lore and it's in that place, and if you go there, this happens. And I like that about it.
Yeah, it will definitely be in my top 10 of this year.
The director was the one who then just got tapped to do the Crow reboot, though.
Oh, that's
Corin
true.
Or Colin,
I think it was. Yeah,
the Crow.
Corin, yeah.
Yeah, when Kevin was here, Kevin was trying to get us to watch it and have him on the show while he was here.
Oh, that's right.
While he was here, but we hadn't had time to see the film. So if he's back, if you're listening, come on the show.
We'd love to have him on.
I loved it.
Yeah,
well, that's on my. Yeah, I went on. Like, I tend to watch VOD stuff on Amazon, so I went and
it's still $7.
Yeah, I picked a few titles, including that one. I just haven't gotten to it yet. But the one I did get to this week, and I texted Elric as soon as I saw it, was Bone Tomahawk, which I rented on Amazon VOD, and it is awesome.
Eli,
so
he
good.
called me and said, "This is bullshit."
This is
Eli Roth rules.
No.
Should I read the text?
Read it. I don't care. Look, because I generally feel this. Now, again, it skates on the horror. Like it's not. It's a fringe movie. It's more of a western.
It is a western that goes into a horror
movie. And the way that it does it. My quote was because such a.
Should I just read it?
Read it. Go ahead. What did I say?
You won't get in trouble. This is what he wrote to me at 11:05 p.m. on Monday.
When I was watching
Holy shit. Watching Bone Tomahawk. Almost over, but they just killed the young...
Don't say who.
This movie pretty much took its giant dick out and pissed all over Eli Roth the Green.
Why don't you ever text me things like that, Rob? I get these PC texts.
Well, because I said it's like Regera Diodato.
This movie.
Because the thing is... The violence in this movie is so shocking and so matter of fact.
Yeah, really matter of fact. I love it.
And out of nowhere.
That's because of the characters. Though. It's not like it's like an orchestrated thing. But it's so like what did you say? Was it's like Cannibal Holocaust just turned like?
No, it's like the Coen Brothers movie with the Coen Brothers character, and they wander into a Regera Diodato film by mistake.
That is so spot on.
Yeah, it's so funny.
And when that moment because there's several, but when there's one particular that it's so shocking that all I remember thinking was like, this is more Cannibal Holocaust than all of Green Inferno.
Than anything we've seen since,
and that's why I said this director just took out his giant thing and pissed all over that movie because this is the one that really should be talked about.
And even if it had no cannibal stuff, it'd just be the best movie. It was, like, to me, it's the best writing of the year.
Oh God,
like
so
the writing, the voices of the character.
Funny.
And if Matthew Fox can be awesome,
I know, awesome.
There's a guy who most people have been going, I hate him now. And like you watch this movie, he's amazing in it. Everyone's good.
Everybody, I agree with you. Everybody's good. Kurt Russell's amazing.
Kurt's great.
I love all the little bit parts. Like it opens with Sid Haig and Dave Arquette. Even the guy that played songs in the bar for he's in 2 minutes. But it's the guy that played Strickland in the Back to the Future trilogy. Oh my God.
Yeah, the main thing I can say about that movie
is that was Strickland? Are you serious?
The bald guy. Yeah.
I just feel like it's not what you think it is. Like the people who've only seen the poster, it's not that movie.
It's because it was one night that we were over at Dave's parents' house and we had gone for I was there for dinner and afterwards his dad was like, let's watch a movie, and he really digs Western. So I was like, I hear Bone Tomahawk is good. Yeah. And had I known what that movie was, I never would have recommended to watch it with his parents. But because...
Ironically, I watched it with Selena's dad.
Oh, did he love it?
My who loved it.
Bob McKendry,
which is so bizarre. And he's not a horror guy at all.
Maria was not so much, but Bob loved it.
But it tells you that's interesting, I think, because it wasn't the cannibal stuff. It was the really good writing. Yeah. That suddenly, we put on at 10 at night with her, with him and their two stepbrothers.
It's 2 hours, 12 minutes.
Yeah, it's but with dialogue that just grabs you and the way, the motivation of the character, it's so matter of fact. It's like The Searchers, has a similar storyline where you're going to rescue someone. But man, it's just the way they talk to each other. And there's all that pride, which I really like. It's something missing from movies.
And I got to tell you, I know you said this last week, but it's just like when I was watching it, I forgot. Obviously, I want Sylvester Stallone to get the best supporting actor for Creed because he did an amazing job in it.
Jenkins.
I want Richard Jenkins, best role he's ever done. And I forgot it was him. It wasn't until 30 minutes in that my roommate was like, is that the guy from Cabin in the Woods?
Because of his voice.
Oh my my God,
it's only the voice that was there, but the rest
he's
just
good,
and he just keeps saying these stories that are just. And him and Kurt Russell's relationship's like my favorite relationship of the year.
He is amazing in that. I wish this one would get Oscar nominations.
Very high on my list for this year.
Yeah,
I mean, a lot of people complain about the way it was shot. I know that's the thing.
Yeah, that was amazing.
But I look at it as it was probably a super low budget movie, with very ambitious, and probably didn't have a lot of time to do it.
Yeah.
Yet he got all these amazing actors because the writing was so strong.
Yeah.
So it didn't. The way it was shot didn't really bother me.
See, I liked it. I thought it was like the simplistic old school Western. I didn't feel like he's trying. And he has made films. I think there's some comments like, oh, he's a writer, he doesn't know how to make a film. It's like he's made all these, like, shot all these shorts as a cinematographer.
Yeah.
You know, so it's like, you know, he's like my number one of people I will want us to get on the show.
Absolutely.
To find out more about it, like to the process. But I don't know. I think it's an exciting
according to your theory, he should already be listening, because everyone
you never know.
involved in horror is listening.
Somebody will at least tweet him to tell him about this.
Yeah.
Right. Two more quick ones. Number one is Eliminators. I'd never heard of.
This is the Scream Factory release. I
Yes.
just got the combo disc with Dungeon Master.
Yes, these are two Charles Band movies, I believe, and they're coming out from Scream Factory Tuesday, December 15th. And I skipped over Dungeon Master. I went right to Eliminators because look at this poster and this tagline. It says, Mandroid, Mercenary, Scientist, Ninja.
Wow.
Each one with a specialist. Together they are the Eliminators.
Oh, wow. Nice.
Wow.
And it's like, yes, I'm going to put that movie on. It was okay.
Wow. Sold.
In true full moon fashion. Good build, good marketing. It's okay.
Wait, is that
Exactly.
Tasha Yar from Star Trek?
Yes, it is.
Wow.
That would be Denise
There you go.
Crosby.
Yeah, Denise.
She's great in
Was
it.
that
Symmetry.
pre or post?
Oh, younger.
She even gets a little bit of a nudie scene that they hold on for quite a while. She changes her shirt, but like she's got her back turned. And
Sadly, that kind of puts me off seeing it weirdly.
Side boob.
All right, side.
No, it's a fun movie. It's just there's something special about that whole full moon empire, that whole era where essentially the main character, who is a quote unquote mandroid, I mean, you can tell watching it that it's all handmade. He's got kind of like the half RoboCop mask on and this giant like tank thing that he rides around in. But I like the ambition of it all, and the fact that the imagination in a lot of these movies far surpassed their budgets.
Was that right after RoboCop? Because he looks just like RoboCop.
It has to be. His
suit looks almost identical.
Yeah, I don't know what the date's probably in the back.
Of like RoboCop knockoffs that came out right afterwards.
I wish the Ninja came into it a little quicker, because he's not until like the hour mark. But that's when I said, oh man, there's like a mercenary who's like an Indiana Jones kind of gruff guy. Like Indiana Jones meets like Crocodile Dundee. The scientist is Denise Crosby, and then like a ninja out of nowhere. And I'm like, this movie's awesome.
I'll be curious to see what you say about the other one. I've never
I know.
seen
I'm going to check that one out with Richard Mall.
Richard Mall, baby. Night Court.
So this one comes out. If you love this era of full moon kind of stuff, I recommend it highly. And last but not least, my double take this week on the website was the Fright Night, both the 1985 version, which I'd seen a million times, and I watched the 2011 remake in 3D, which is the way it was released. And my buddies Jackson Stewart and Steve Scarlatta came and joined me for it, and we got to check them out together. Of course, I don't really need to talk about the original Fright Night too much, because everybody knows it, everybody loves it. It's a classic movie. It's Tom Holland's homage to Rear Window. Hitchcock, big Hitchcock fan, but through the lens of the API Hammer movies that he grew up watching.
And almost as good as part two.
No,
it's not far off. It's just a hair.
God.
A hair below part two.
No. And actually, right now, when this airs, right now on Blumhouse, your minds are going to be blown, because Tom Holland told me a story off record about how Roddy McDowall really, really, really wanted to make Fright Night 3 and set it up with a producer. They were both going to come back, and Roddy hooked up with this producer that had the rights, was going to finance it. But right the week before he met with Tom to set it all in motion, Roddy warned him, and then these are all quotes that I got approved from Tom. He's like, look, this is by far the worst human being I've ever met in my life.
Referring to Tom Holland?
No, referring to this producer.
Oh, okay.
He's like, this producer, there's just some darkness. I can't explain it. And Roddy McDowall was a very sweet guy that got along with everybody, but this is a guy that he was kind of skating a thin line with, because there was something off about him. And 2 weeks before they were going to meet to greenlight Fright Night 3 and make it, this guy got murdered by his sons. the Menendez brothers.
Holy shit! That is
Yes.
a crazy fucking story.
I got Tom's. He told me this years ago in confidence, and finally, I was like, I got to tell this story. So with his blessing, it is now up on Blumhouse.com. That entire
So we could still make part 3 with the Menendez brothers. We just got to get those guys out of jail.
Sure.
So who has rights? Who holds rights? Well, I guess the
Well, now
studio does.
ever since that, it's been a mess because then they defaulted to, I want to say Corellico. He was explaining the whole thing to me, but then they were kind of like the company that went bankrupt for part 2, owned part of it, and eventually DreamWorks was able to work out a deal to get the remake rights. And then from there, the Fright Night 2 that came out was actually licensed to 20th Century Fox. So DreamWorks didn't even make the direct-to-video Fright Night 2 that came out in 2013. It's a real complicated mess. And even right now, Tom doesn't know where the rights are, like today. But anyway, that's a huge sidetrack.
Could I do the special guest star where I come on and I do Fright Night 2 and Fright Night 2, the new Fright Night 2, which I have yet to see. I've heard it's terrible. That will be a fun guest
We
one.
will let you do that one, Elric.
just so I can.
Wow,
Your
good for
pitch
you.
is approved.
But
for sitting through the new Fright Night 2.
But how did you feel about the new one?
I just want to say, when I saw it when it came out, I liked it. I didn't love it. I've said this before in the show. The problem, not even the problem, but the issue when you step into a remake of a movie that you know so well is that it is impossible on your first viewing to really judge it on its own because there's characters you're familiar with and you're like, how are they going to play this? How is that going to play out? How are these beats going to happen? I always find when you see it the second time and all that's gone, you're able to appreciate it a little bit more. Watching it back to back with the original, I actually kind of loved it. I thought it was a really solid.
I remember really enjoying it.
It's really good.
I saw it in the theater and thought it was a stand-up movie.
It's fine. The only problems I have with it are any times, because it follows its own unique new story set in Vegas,
like
a transient community where where people, where people go disappearing all the time, where people sleep all day and work at night because that's what it's like in Vegas. And so I like the setting. The only things I don't like is when it tries to hit those beats from the original movie again, like trying to remake bits of it. And it's like, you were totally fine in this original story. Because originally when I watched it, I thought like the Charlie Brewster of it. In the original, he's a likable kid, right off the bat, but he's kind of a douche in the new movie. Like he's douchey. He's really mean to Evil Ed. Right off the bat, who's telling him, hey, our friend that we grew up with went missing. Don't you give a shit? And because he didn't initially, I was kind of like, I don't like this character. But actually, Jackson pointed out to me, he's like, yeah, but now he has an arc because he starts out kind of feeling guilty for not really being a good person and then grows into the likable character that's like, I really need to make this right, which I thought was interesting. And then more importantly, in the original, Chris Sarandon has got that romanticism behind his vampire. He doesn't really, there's a moment where he holds up Charlie and he says, I'm going to give you something I don't have, which is a choice. So he kind of says, look, I have to do this. And then he sees Amy, who reminds him of an old love. So there's kind of that traditional vampire romanticism behind his backstory. But in the remake, and I initially didn't like this at first, but I just loved it watching it this time. Colin Farrell, and they actually say it in the movie, is the shark from Jaws. He doesn't care. He's evil. He likes it. He likes killing. He loves the thrill. He loves fucking with people.
He's the Vegas version.
And that's all he does is just kind of fuck with Charlie nonstop. I kept imitating him at the office this week, and now Greg and John Humphreys want to rewatch it. I was like, hey, guy. That's how he starts every scene.
I love Colin Farrell in just about everything.
So I
usually don't like him, but I liked him in that, and I liked him in the TV show I didn't like this year. But
True
he was really
Detective.
good. He was fun to watch in that.
Yeah.
Sometimes I don't like him. I don't know why.
If you've seen the movie In Bruges, you will love him.
Well, that's
He's so great.
That's the best.
He's awesome.
But no, I really appreciated the Fright Night remake, and I think people should give it another chance without that that context of it being a remake and just watching it as a vampire movie. It's actually really cool. I thought so.
Except Charlie doesn't forget the whole previous story. You have to wait for part 2 for that. Amazing stuff.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to be talking some franchising.
Franchising.
A guy who has had his finger in a couple pies, both of them big franchise pies. So let's do that, shall we?
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, and we are back on the show.
With Stifler's mom.
God, I wish. No, an even better guest than Stifler's mom.
There is no better guest.
That's reaching for it now,
The
man.
guy who produced Stifler's mom.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Stifler's
Okay, hold on.
grandfather?
But this Craig Perry, but you just reminded me of a story. So Eddie
Great self-intro.
That's the greatest intro in the
Okay,
show history.
Stifler's mom, Eddie K. Thomas, who played the young man who had sex with her.
Yes.
They were roommates out here in L.A.
Get
after
outta
they
here.
shot the movie. Nope. He was from New York
Stifler's
originally.
mom moved in
No,
with Stifler's
he moved
friend.
in with Stifler's mom, his paramour from the movie.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow.
So Finch wound up being roommates with Stifler's mom for
He's
several
my
years
idol on
in LA
film and
after
in
he
real
shot
life.
the movie.
Wow.
Now they weren't roommates.
Sure, they were.
Our guest produced the Final Destination 1, Final Destination 2, Final Destination 3, Final Destination 4, and the Final Destination, and Final Destination 5.
And God, I hope 6.
I hope so too, because 5 was so
Yeah,
damn
me too.
good.
Yeah.
But also all the American Pie movies, I'll skip naming them all because I could never possibly. I know one's called Bandcamp.
I mean, well, there were 5 direct-to-video and 4 theatrical.
Yeah.
So
That's a lot.
Wow.
It is
Are they still going?
There is a movement, and I don't mean bowel, to make another one, but the price point has to be brought down. Like you're looking at movies like Neighbors, which is made for like $19 million. American Reunion was made for $50 million.
Yeah.
So it's just a different algorithm, and if we can bring the price point down, and we've been having conversations, there is a worldwide appetite because the last one made $235 million worldwide.
The last
American Reunion.
Theatrical.
American Reunion, the
Really?
one
That's
that
the
brought
one
back
where they
the
got
original
married.
crew.
Oh, I did
Yeah.
not know that. I did not know it was like a hit like that.
Oh, yeah,
They had the
totally.
same.
Domestically, it was not the hit that they had hoped for.
How's the
Internationally,
Israeli
it was
version?
massive. The Israeli
Is it Israeli?
Because I
version
know,
of
I'm talking about the
Did he
old.
throw his
the old,
pubes out the window
yeah,
in
well,
the
that's
Israeli
Gaggle and
version?
Globus one.
Yes,
that
was it-
was Porky's?
was it
it was
Last
like the
American
Israeli
Version was it?
Yeah, it was
Yeah,
Last
yeah.
American Virgin. But they all have a connection.
Or as I call the story of my life. So,
Well,
They had the same wedding song as we did in the American Pie reunion.
did we?
You did. It was Into the Mystic, Van Morrison.
But Craig's also a legit horror fan.
He
He would come to
thank
Secret
you.
16 screenings. We met
Big
in Mike's
supporter,
backyard
right?
before Secret 16. I think the Prowler. I think he might have been.
Yep.
at.
Yeah, the Prowler.
And he's come to a lot of like kind of obscure horror films. So it's not
yeah, no, he messaged me before we even met to tell me that he was a Killer POV fanatic.
This is
It
true.
was amazing. I was like, really?
Brian Collins on Facebook said, I just did this podcast for my friends. And I was like, I have to figure that. Because Brian Collins I'd met during press for the movies.
Yes.
So I listened to his podcast, realized that he was a pain in the ass, but
Yes.
you guys are awesome. And then proceeded to listen to everyone up to that point in a
Wow.
week. Listened to them all, got up to
Wow.
speed. And now I'm sort of like an addict. I'm in the backyard tying off and slapping the vein.
I need to ask, not to sound vain or anything, because
That's okay.
you are the producer of 2 huge franchises, both of which I loved and went to see theatrically every time they came out.
Appreciate it.
But as an industry person, like, what is it to you that appeals about the show? Like, I know from people that are friends of ours and listeners, they often tell us they like getting in on the conversation. They feel like they're
It's
listening.
like being at a bar.
on Friends at a bar. Yeah. So as a quote unquote industry insider and producer,
You like that
why do
big
you
term.
like it? I'm curious.
like as a hot shot.
It's
You're a big guy. Yeah.
It's more like a hot pocket, but I like it. No, for me, just personally, it is both the communal sense that is an expression of the community itself, but it's also, and this is honestly, I'm nervous because to be in the room with really well-versed, educated, well-viewed, with a great sort of sense of the resume is dark and deep with all the movies you've
sexy
seen,
as fuck.
and it's literally educated on your behalf too. So to be in
Elric's
the room
already
with these
putting
kind of
his pants
guys
off.
and yet know that it's a room where no one's measuring dicks. They're just saying, hey, we love this.
Yeah.
I love this. And to share information, that's I think the biggest thing for me is the fact that you can listen, go through and write down a ton of movies that you may or may not have seen. And then the connections between the movies and the filmmakers behind them is the thing I think that this podcast delivers to the fans, is that it's not just one movie. Everything feeds off of each other. And if you like one, you can find a whole subgenre that you may have never even known about. So I think that the prospect of being introduced to things is why the show is so special and why people react to it. And
you
you
know,
guys
I
are
think
funny.
That may beat Dick Grunner for best quote about us. That may have to go into our marketing material
What's that?
from
thing about the
everything
dick,
he just
measuring
said.
dick.
Measuring
dick
dicks.
measuring thing,
Yeah,
yeah.
the front that got me.
That
Thanks,
just
man.
that I think
I
was
now
some
know
good
you can't
marketing
stand up.
material.
Well, I think that's a big part of when we were kids and looking for other kids to talk to these movies about. And this is kind of the evolution of that. So, I mean, let's talk about that first, because it's, you gave us the Final Destination franchise. Thank you. What was your intro to the horror world? Or did you consider yourself a monster kid?
Completely. My first serious recollection was watching the 1933 King Kong. And it wasn't in front of the TV. It was from around the corner of the door into the den while it was on, because it was having the impact that you would hope it would have.
How old are you, do you think?
3.
Wow.
I remember begging my parents to take me to see The Exorcist when I was 5. Not because I knew what it was, but because the marketing materials were sort of striking. I said, that's cool. What is that? That is really compelling. Just that shadow and presenting the mystery of what was happening up in that room was really intriguing to me. And then, of course, I'm of the age where Creature Double Feature on Channel 56, all the sort of UHF stations, and they keep sort of churning you full of all the monster movies, from the classic ones to the Japanese movies.
Where was this? Was this here?
Massachusetts.
Oh, Massachusetts. Okay.
Right.
Massachusetts. So I was always interested in it. And then, of course, when you start with Star Wars and Jaws and that 1975 to 1978, all those movies really were sort of my formative years. And then understanding what makeup effects were, and started realizing, hey, so people do this.
Yeah.
And then once my father, who was pretty cool, took me at my first R-rated movie was Alien. And that same year, he took me to a midnight show of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the original, 74, and then Dawn of the Dead. Midnight show. I was 11.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So cool pop. Right?
Now, will you be as cool to your son?
He
not want to watch it?
Not interested at all.
Wow.
Yeah, I remember your kid.
He's
Like, nope.
Even Scooby-Doo, he's like, no, I don't want to.
Marnie's fascinated by it. Like, we have to tell her, like, I have to say, no, this one's a bit much for you. Stop.
But that's because the alternate's being spanked. You guys beat her when she
I know,
doesn't watch it.
I'm always like tying her. No, she had a Scooby-Doo birthday party this year, and it's still like her favorite thing. And werewolves, she loves werewolves.
Well, this comes down, I really believe you have to discover it on your own. You can't really show your kid. You can show your kids, but I feel like it's better if they find it first. You can then like extrapolate on it. But it's about discovery, man. That first time you saw something when you weren't meant to do it, that's a big part of the friction to me. But
it's about the illicit. The things that you're not supposed to watch that are also, I think, for children, the very fears that they haven't codified and put into a place where, I understand what that is because of science, because of what grade they're in. Everything is scary. Lightning and thunder is scary because what is that? Their children are literally like people 300, 400, 500 years ago without science to prove it. So that, I think the movies that we remember seeing as kids probably were much more impactful because we're watching it without the filter of knowledge and education is primal. So, sometimes you see a movie that you say, that movie scared the heck out of me. And then you look at it now, you're like, it's not so scary. But remember the filter you were watching with, the eyes you were watching it with.
Fear of the unknown. That's essentially horror for all of us.
And why atmosphere is actually, and horror is the only genre that gets, I think that's why I like it, and art films get away with it a little bit, is where the atmosphere is actually more important than the story. And then most people go, oh no, story above everything. No, not in horror, not really. Like story is still important to get you through, but as a kid, the things you'll remember were atmospheric touches that are part of just, cinematography and tension and,
There was a TV movie, I believe it was called Voyage into Terror, that had a breathing sarcophagus. And I remember vividly this little sarcophagus that was on the ship that the people were coming back from Egypt, and the sarcophagus started breathing, and it scared the piss out of me as a kid. And I think I looked up the movie subsequently, and I was like, this is a ridiculous, silly movie, but that image has stuck with me, and it will,
it's like House, because everyone laughs now, because House is kind of viewed as a horror comedy, but I just remember that first viewing, that thing that came out of the closet, every time just freaked the shit. If I watch it now, I'd be on my ass laughing, probably, because it'll seem silly with William Cat.
You also had the marketing campaign in New Zealand.
That was the scariest movie ever made. Like, that was the marketing in New Zealand, which is amazing to me now.
Wow.
But I think that's really important. It's like, it puts something visual to your fears, too. Like, even think about Poltergeist. You were talking about lightning and thunder. Once lightning and thunder is then paired with the clown, or the tree.
3. Yeah. 1, 2. Okay.
Yeah.
But it's also, I think you say atmosphere is important, but I think context.
Yeah.
Story isn't necessarily context. Story is just propulsion, things moving forward. Context is, again, the unknown.
Safety sometimes. It's too safe.
The assumption of safety. And that's what, I think when you go and sit down in the theater, the assumption of being safe is no longer something you can have. You have to be willing to lose that. And filmmakers have to strive to make you think, okay, I understand what's going on. Now I don't understand what's going on. So once there's sort of comfort of you're there, that's when you start pulling out the rug.
And as we get older, we look to, like when we see something like Scream for the first time, you're giving me the safe context, and whoa, you just killed, spoiler, Drew Barrymore. That's major. Like, and I feel like horror has to always go there, especially when you're going to an audience. Cabin in the Woods is something I think had a lot of fun playing with these tropes. The trope isn't enough at a certain point. It's like the fix isn't enough. Somewhat. Well, I say to the guy who made Final Five.
I believe it. I mean, at some point, I feel like a sausage maker, just grinding them out, So anyway, the horror genre has always been something that's been fascinating to me. I've always loved it. I started trying to do makeup effects, the Tom Savini books, and then it was funny. God, there was the first video that they did in like the early 80s that KMB put out that showed how to do the effects, and I'm forgetting the name of it. But I was an usher at a movie theater out here because I interned in 1988 with Arnold Kopelson. And so I was working at the Avco before they destroyed it, and actually before they even split it up. And I'm there, and I recognized Greg Nicotero from that video. And so I said, I know you. You're the guy that's making. He's like, oh, cool, kid. I'm wearing polyester. I look like an asshole. But yeah, so
that's hilarious.
So those things always sort of they feed into it, and they feed into your memories. And I didn't really go too far into the makeup thing. I just wound up sort of pushing straight forward into movies and trying to make movies and doing video yearbooks and doing short films and doing Super 8 movies.
Did you go to film school?
I did. I went to Syracuse.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, in New York.
Yes, exactly. Like I suffered the indignities that Joe Lynch suffered too.
That connection. So what was, making your own films, obviously, and the effects, but what were you aiming to do in the film business, or did you just want to make movies any way possible?
It was sort of an any way possible thing. I came out here, and my first job was in the mailroom at New Line Cinema, which was great because I knew New Line because they were the only people doing genre films of the kind of that I responded to. I remember going to see Nightmare on Elm Street in the theater. I remember sort of recognizing that flashing at the original, the red sort of flashing New Line. That meant something to me. As a total aside, same theater. I remember seeing Demi Moore in Parasite 3D.
Oh my gosh, Charlie Band movie.
And I still have, they were giving out little high gloss cards that you open it up and the monster comes out. And I still have that in my files somewhere.
Oh my gosh.
A little promotional thing.
That's actually a decent movie.
For what it is, and the whole with the old lady and all of a sudden her face, it comes right out of the camera.
It's got some good scares to it.
It does what it needs to do. Introducing Demi Moore to the world, sort of. So anyway, I started New Line and did that for like 3 months. Honestly, in the mailroom. And then I got a job as a reader at Silver Pictures, Joel Silver's company. And I did that job for about 3 or 4 months after that. And then I got hired to be story editor at Silver Pictures, not because I'm a genius, but because everyone was fired. So I'm the only guy standing in the valley, and I'm the only one who can fight the war. Did that for another 5 or 6 months, became creative executive. And then about 5 months later, director of development, and I was director of development for 14 months. So it was quite an interesting ride being there. I think my first premiere was Hudson Hawk was the first premiere.
Nice.
Yes.
I know that didn't do that well when it came out.
No, but it was fascinating. And I remember doing notes, like you mentioned, when you kill somebody off in an interesting way, the sort of psycho thing. Demolition Man, Executive Decision. I worked on Executive Decision. Originally, we had turned it into a woman, and it was going to be Demi Moore. And then we did a sex change on it about a year and a half later, and it became back to being a man. It became Kurt Russell.
And that's the one where Seagal was somebody who was meant to be in the movie for longer, but no, they weren't.
No, that was one of the great things about that original script is they always killed that guy at the midpoint. Just to sort of completely pull the rug out.
Something about that story. I thought there was some where somebody didn't get along with someone or something.
There's a lot. No. That was always in that script. Okay. But what was really funny about that is Joel was like, I don't want Seagal. I can't have Seagal. And the executive went and got the binder from behind him and said, well, here's what the international numbers will be with Seagal. I was like, I love Seagal. Put him in the movie right now. It's fantastic. I love him. So look, then working with Joel, obviously, I actually was an usher at the Die Hard premiere.
Oh, cool.
So this again, 1988 was an interesting year.
Christmas movies,
which you can go see. They're doing a Christmas Eve showing of the Die Hard movies at UBEV.
Yeah, and I think Egyptian's doing Die Hard and Lethal Weapon, which is pretty cool.
Yeah,
cool beans. I just remember driving down Olympic. I'm like, Nakatomi Plaza. There it is. It exists. And then after my time at Silver was done, I went to work with Scott Rudin for 2.5 years and worked on everything from Sleepy Hollow to Truman Show. Wow. Marvin's Room, Clueless, First Wives Club. I actually got hired by Paramount to write the treatment for the sequel to First Wives Club back in the day.
Second Wives Club?
It was called First Wives Club Round 2.
Oh, I see. Was it still like Bette Midler?
Oh, it was all
Sarah Jessica Parker.
Yes.
Diane Keaton?
I've
Diane
seen
Keaton,
it.
yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Not Katie Holmes.
Not Katie.
She wasn't even around yet.
No, she wasn't even a glimmer in somebody's nether.
And Tom
regions.
Cruise's
Nothing.
nether
Yeah.
I don't know what that means.
that just got-
I don't know what that
It just
means.
got creepy,
It's like
Alex.
it's her father.
Good job,
but-
Why did you just lay down a shower curtain? That's so fucked up.
You know, it's weird. Just happened.
Okay. And then, but the guy I worked with in the mailroom, we became partners, and Pi was the first movie I got a credit on.
Wow.
And how do you get that first property? Was it through reading other scripts?
No, that first property was an in-house idea. We gave him that idea. 4 guys tried to get laid before they graduate. What could happen next? And he wrote the draft, and we went up with a script on Friday, and by 7:30 that night, it sold for $750,000.
Now, the rumor was that it was sold under this title of like funny,
Untitled $10 million teenage sex comedy that studio readers will hate, but we know you will love, by Adam Hers. Because we figured this is the kind of thing where why let some 23-year-old kid who's just dealing with Truby's story structure tell you what's a good movie. It's a good movie for what it is.
Right.
Don't sort of try and apply precepts to it. So it negated any coverage that would come in. People would get coverage that was bad. They're like, I should read it myself. They kind of are telling me, don't be a douche and like let somebody else dictate your thoughts. And people did wind up reading it. And unlike any other project I've ever worked on, we were shooting 6 months later.
Wow.
That's crazy.
That's really fast.
It's like 7 years is normally how long it takes from a spec to get anything on screen if you're lucky. And it was a function of DVD was coming up, and they felt, well, we can make a lot of money off of DVD. It has sex in the title. It'll be fine.
Well, before that, what was the last time we had like a good teen sex comedy? Was it quite a few years?
It was a number of years before. I mean, they stopped doing them. Also, in the 80s and in the early 90s. Everybody was reacting to sexual mores, Clinton, all that stuff. So people were just not wanting. There was a rise in conservatism, and so none of the kids were able to act like true teenagers. And one of the things we liked about that movie is everybody kind of knew somebody liked those characters.
Yeah.
It felt relatively real within the context of a movie, and it just seemed to hit a nerve.
What was it? 99? When did that one come
99.
out? The first one, yeah. Because I remember. I mean, I grew up with older brothers, so I saw Revenge of the Nerds and Porky's and all these crazy sex comedies growing up on cable, and that was the first one.
That's because you're a pervert. It has nothing to do with.
Well, I mean, that's obvious, but no, but theatrically, there was kind of they just didn't make those kind of movies anymore. Like Bachelor Party, I still think is one of the funniest movies ever.
But let's remember, an R-rated movie became something that was taboo because you had PG-13. Suddenly, PG-13, that was the catch-all for everything. So to do it for real and to make it R and to really aggressively make it R and have kids talk the way kids normally talk was anathema to their thinking, because they think, well, we won't make as much money because kids are... No, trust me. Kids are going to find their way in there, and even if they don't, they'll talk about it. And that movie was also a balancing act because it's a little sweeter than you would think. It's actually
sweeter than Revenge of the Nerds because of the kind of characters.
Yeah.
So we got away with a lot because at the end of the day, it was never cruel.
Yeah.
Oh, people got revenge on themselves and they gave shit to their friends, but it wasn't mean-spirited. And I think that distinguished it from a huge amount of the other movies that also came in its wake. Tomcats is just mean. It's just a mean movie.
What was the bit most successful of the ripoffs that happened afterwards? Were there any that did kind of?
Well, if you look at old school, literally, it's the actual same title tree.
Yeah,
just with older characters.
Yeah, so that did like 70 domestic.
Can you call that a teen sex comedy? Kind of, I guess it's college, so I guess so.
Yeah,
kind of fits in there. Then what about I remember distinctly reading in Fangoria like a one-pager on a little movie called Flight 182. And being fascinated by this concept, the idea of following the slasher structure, but it's not a guy in a mask. It is death itself that's coming after you. Recently, I think within the last year, Jeffrey Reddick, who wrote...
Who?
That guy. Jeffrey had posted a screenplay of that he wrote that concept as a X-Files spec episode. I never knew that. I always thought it was an original, spec script for a feature. So how did that script come across your desk?
Jeffrey was working in the New York office for New Line, and there's a real New Liner community. I mean, Michael DeLuca was an exec at New Line. He was the director of development when I started there. Donna Langley was at New Line. All these people who executives started at New Line. It was one of those places that sort of like the Weinstein Company in New York. People filtered through and then were spread out like seeds into the universe. But Jeffrey knew somebody who was working at our company and sent over not the original spec episode that he'd written, but a 3-page sort of outline as to what the premise and what would story go by. I remember I was in San Francisco at the time, and they faxed it to my hotel, and I was like, there's a movie here. So he and I sat down, and we turned it into like a 20-page treatment based not on a television structure, but on a feature structure. And New Line acquired it for a significant amount of money, and it really jump-started his career and his desire to be a writer. And I'm sure you know his story, which is pretty great too.
Yeah.
So he went off and wrote the draft of that. And in the spirit of trying to find a director at the same time, we actually went to Morgan and Wong while he was writing to say, hey, this is what we have. Like, would you guys, we know you want to do features, and they were too busy. And then the search kind of went along. He handed in his draft. We gave him notes. And then those guys came back around almost 10 months later and said, is that thing still available? Because it really stuck on our craws as something that we could really make a meal out of.
And they were on X-Files at the time. That's the irony, is that he wrote an X-Files episode, and
Weird,
the guys that were
completely.
on X-Files made it.
So they came in, and then they did their version of it, and they wrote their version of it using Jeff Reed's idea, some elements of Jeff Reed's script, but also the perspective that they had on it. And to New Line's credit, the first draft came in, and they greenlit the first draft. There were no revisions. It was
Wow.
Yep. Now, we did some revisions subsequent with the standard production stuff, but we were funded and ready to go based on that first draft. Because I think what you were saying earlier, it was a concept that you hadn't really seen before.
Yeah.
All of the slasher tropes, but you couldn't ascribe it to a person. There was no way to get around and understand how to make death work or not work. It was sort of an ethereal is. It was what it was. And it's you think unavoidable. And by not corporealizing it and making it a physical form, how do you fight something like that? And because everybody, just the very nature of who we are afraid of death.
And a lot of them are everyday. Not some of them are huge, grandiose, especially as the series goes on. But a lot of them would start in everyday things. And I think most horror movies that I really like will have one death that's caused by an everyday object, like one scene like that, where everyone in the audience goes, "Oh yeah," and you kind of get it because you've thought about it. You've been in the shower and seen the soap and gone, "Oh, imagine if I slip and hit my head."
Yeah.
But when the whole movie is made up of those, but you also actively see them taking form and shape, and you can't do anything about it, like behind the guy's back. I think that's really cool. I think that's part of why we kind of
that Hitchcockian formula, like you're spelling out how it's going to happen. Yeah.
But there's two things too. We also played the note of the characters in those situations have this feeling that something is around them. And we've all had that feeling that someone's watching us, something's in the room with us. And you're like, you shake it off, you can't see it, so this must be me. But then if you watch the movies, at time the camera starts to become death as it's working and weaving its way around. So you jump from voyeur perspective, omniscient perspective, character perspective. So you get the full complement of how you generate tension in these sequences when the sequences are well done. And I'm the first to admit, some of them I think we've nailed it, knocked out of the park. Other ones just suck. They're just terrible because it's a really tricky balancing act to get it right. And also the dark sort of comic opportunities that are there. If you miss the mark on that, the whole scene collapses.
Well, the strength of the series, especially in researching, before the show, even though I didn't rewatch whole movies, was just thinking about the best thing about them is the way you build it up to be one thing, and then there's a slight reversal or something else. And that's the part that can be really fun sometimes.
Sometimes. I think I appreciate that, the build up to some of them. But what I love about, and I'm going to talk specifically about the first movie for now, because again, I very distinctly remember that coming out in 2000 and kind of how it changed. I was always on top of horror. So seeing this was so new and unique to me. I liked the shock kill. Which, by the way, going forward from this point on, both with Final Destination and our topic, I am warning you guys that it's going to get spoiler heavy.
Yeah. Super spoiler.
There's no way around that when it comes to deaths.
Lots of movies, death scenes being explored.
But, the girl with the bus, I remember, not only do I remember that being shocking in theaters, but then there were trailers, like commercials on TV that showed the audience reaction to people jumping up in their seats.
Ready for a little secret?
Yes.
Those are the New Line employees of the New Line screening.
Of course.
They are.
I knew it.
It was not
totally
real.
fake. But that's exactly how people in the audience that I saw reacted. And it's an interesting thing. I always, when I talk movies with people, I love all kinds of movies, but I always say my two favorite genres are horror and comedy. And there's a very clear reason for both of that, because they're the only two genres that can generate an uncontrollable reaction out of you. You see something funny, you laugh out loud along with the crowd. You see something scary that jolts you, you jump up. And I find that so fascinating. There's the only two genres. I mean,
I'll go to a whole other place.
Okay.
They are structurally exactly the same.
Yeah.
They both deal with sustain, reveal, who knows what information at what time. Again, shock, mistaken identity, like not knowing who people are, and like the whole notion of I don't understand. You're not like the thing. Who are you? What
and
are you?
Relief, suspense and relief,
Yeah.
release.
Release. It's all that push and pull, and comedy works just the same way. And so when I wound up doing Pi and then Final Destination and then another Pi and back and forth, I became almost confused because they were so similar in terms of how the scenes and the sequences had to be constructed. Particularly the Pi movies are French farce. There's classic French farce, opening, closing doors, who's here, who's under the bed. But that's the same thing with a horror movie.
Yeah.
Who's under the bed? Who's over there? Who knows what when they come in the room? If I'm hiding behind something and someone's in the background, that could be funny or scary. It just depends upon tone and atmosphere and all the things that you're saying. I've always said, Stephen Miller's The Aggression Scale is Home Alone. But it's a totally different tone, but it's basically the same premise, same idea.
Yeah.
See, I was never as into the shot kills. I mean, they're great in Final Destination, but I liked the more elaborate ones where it was like, how do you kill someone with a tanning bed? Like, what steps do you have to go to
With relish.
get to that? With Slurpee, if I remember correctly. But I loved how in the Final Destination films, it would take these steps to make it look like it could naturally happen. So that it wasn't like just death coming up and like slamming the door shut and then holding it down or anything. It was this elaborate, like, it's not necessarily death. This could happen.
Well, and when we have failed, we have had death actually do things that is more paranormal. And that's when the sequence of it does not work because you can immediately step back from the plausibility of it happening to you.
That's my
that particular
3,
sequence, by the way, the tanning bed sequence, you have no idea how hard it was to get that shelf to fall and have it editorially look like it's going to lock in underneath both of their things. We tried for almost an entire half a day at $180,000 a day just to get that fucking thing to work, and it never quite worked. We realized this is done. Do it in parts. Second unit, just pick up these parts. We can cut it together, and that's half of the challenge too. Is people have no concept how unbelievably hard it is to make these movies. Because
it's very much like a Rube Goldberg that I assume it's hard to direct and difficult to edit.
Direct, edit, but also just for every department has to be at the top of their game. Props has to have everything working because if the prop isn't working, visual effects can't fix it. Special effects can't make the water run the right way. If the construction team hasn't made the tilt, every department has to be right in there. Every week we wind up having production meetings, which would normally be you do right before production. We have them every week where every department is there. We go through the script page by page. Any questions? And people get really pissed off. But then 2 weeks before we start shooting, they're like, I hadn't even thought about that. I got a question. So thank God that we instituted that policy because there's so many little things that can just slip through the cracks. And if one element isn't working, that sentence that is that sequence will not make sense.
Which was the most stressful to make as a producer in terms of those kind of questions, the most going on to stay on top of in terms of all
it was the bridge sequence, 100%, because that was a 62-day sequence.
And
that was
a
62-day shoot, of which 19 days were spent shooting 5 minutes of film. That is so
on
out
a
of
real bridge.
Well, there was actually shooting helicopter shots on the actual Lionsgate Bridge up in Vancouver. We had one Sunday morning for 4 hours to shoot everything practically that we could. And then we actually leveled half of a side of a mountain that was overlooking a coastal area. And we did about 450 feet of actual bridge, and we built it all. And then on this side, we had a 200 by 100 foot retractable green screen. So when we're gunning in that direction, we could digitally extend the entire bridge. That was madness because we were spending $280,000 a day for 6 days because we had 35 grips. We had two huge 40 by 60 silks to sort of even out the light. It was ridiculous how big it felt. And then we went and had a section of the bridge on a 14,000 pound pig iron gimbal that would work and pitch and yaw on a 270 degree green screen. And what was interesting, finding a gimbal, which is the thing that makes things like move and pitch and yaw. We don't want to make one of these things, and so the people were calling special effects calling around, and some guy had a gimbal they didn't use in like 10 years. We're like, go get that thing. We brought it in. It was the one from the first Final Destination for the plane that had been missing. For 10 years. Nobody knew what it was. So the guy looked and was like, hey, wait a second. He called the original effects guy. It's like, no, that's the thing. So they retrofitted it to be digitally controlled as opposed to it was a hydraulic joystick 15 years earlier. But yeah.
Wow.
And yeah, it shows that's one of the best sequences. I mean, that's
I was going to say totally worth it.
Had to storyboard the entire thing, every inch of its life.
Did you ever feel out of your was that one where you ever fell out of your depth, like where the control of making something that big? I mean, because American Pie is small, and then you exponentially getting bigger with each film.
But I think that was the gift of this franchise, is that everyone got larger and the expectations increased. And I have learned more about muscular, big filmmaking by doing these silly little horror movies than anyone would ever imagine. I mean, you could go throw me on the set of a $150 million movie. I would understand exactly the things that we're talking about. It's not, and what's so fascinating too, and as filmmakers here, that's all bullshit. Camera, script, actors. Everything else is just bells and whistles. If that stuff, that one-to-one between lens and actor and their eyes isn't working, you're fucked. It's over. And one of the challenges of this franchise too is people give us a lot of guff because the characters are never great. Let's be honest. I mean, they're pretty archetypical. Every time we try layering characters and we go to a preview, the audience is like, cut all that shit out. Too much talking. Get to the kills. So sometimes you feel like you're in the Roman Coliseum and they're just shoving the Christians out one after one.
Remember who's leading in the political polls right now.
Thank you very much.
Moment of the show. Just remember that, America.
Yes. So that's always been a challenge too. And I think that FD5 was a return to at least an effort to make it a little bit more character friendly and interesting and have some actually reversals of intent and fortune, which makes a movie.
And it makes a great point because honestly, I've been a huge fan of the franchise. I cannot tell you anything about the characters, but I can list the kills. I can be like, laser eye machine, and just be like all of the different
Devin
ways.
Sawa, I can a little bit. He's the only one that I identified from the start. But that's because he was there a little longer, maybe.
Yeah, and also
and he started it.
That's a slow burn. I mean, the kid dying in the bathroom. That's like 45 minutes into the movie. There are very few kills in the original.
But you've had
film.
a fake kill, a big fake,
With a big
great one.
We got a lot. We purchased a lot of goodwill with that opening plane sequence, which they had. Like I said, on that gimbal, we had an entire 60-seat plane on a gimbal that we could close off. We had the techno crane gunning down the middle so it could pitch and yaw and do everything, but the camera staying steady. It was cool as shit.
Yeah,
Did you guys build that on a studio set?
Yeah. It's all
I mean, the comparison to X-Files is good, but it's a better comparison to Twilight Zone because it's positing a question, which is like, and which I really like about it, even when I think back to it, which is if you had that exact dream and that exact moment, I'd say most people would still go because you'd realize, it's just a dream. That's stupid. Like,
oh my God,
I'd go on a plane. You've got your ticket, your family are there, whatever. You'd get on the plane, but you wouldn't feel good about it if it was quite as visceral a dream as that.
But that's the genius of the conceit that Jeffrey came up with.
Yeah.
Is that's the access point that makes it relatable, which is the critical thing for I think any horror movie. If it's so unrelatable as a circumstance, we build a bridge and a wall. We build a wall between us and what's happening, and then you're just a spectator. But if you want to be involved, you have to relate to the characters, relate to the situation, which, and again, I'm going to say it up front. I said it before we were off mic, but I've not seen It Follows. I'm a bad dog. But from what I understand, just there's a lot of relatability for that first hour of that movie. You understand who these people are and what they're sort of dealing with. So,
and it's a different type of movie too. It's definitely in the kind of art house model. I think you'll actually like it. Would be my guess.
Well, I want to go back a little bit really quickly. Regarding the first movie. So why the title change? Because obviously it was listed as something else, and let's be honest, 9 Inch Nails The Fragile came out in 1999, which I love. And I mean, the character, Kara Smith pulls up and Into the Void is playing 9 Inch Nails, and the lyric is The Final Destination. So it obviously came from that song.
Actually, it didn't. It didn't. The title was Flight 180, and here's
Flight 180. Okay,
Flight 180. Here's an interesting story. The first draft that went into the studio, the exec at the time was getting on a plane, and his assistant had handed him a manila envelope with a script on it. He was going to New York. He gets in the plane, and he pulls out the script. Flight 180. Hey, hold on. He pulls out his ticket. He was on Flight 180 going to New York. He's like, fuck that. I'm not reading this at all. He waited until he landed before he read it.
That's weird.
But look, a movie called Flight 180, if it's just about a plane, that's narrowing the opportunity for everything. So we wanted it to be about transportation, and obviously it has to have something to do with the flight because the marketing campaign is going to be anchored by that plane crash, and everyone's going to talk about that plane crash. So the notion of Final Destination is something that Morgan Wong came up with because we just made a list of every possible phrase or term that goes with travel. And Final Destination was Welcome to Your Final Destination when you're going to Paris and Europe or whatever. And everything else was probably the serendipity or good luck.
He's like, what they did is they had 10 titles. They had Tony Todd say them all, which everyone Final Destination.
To be honest, that was my idea to have Tony do all the marketing voiceover, because I said, you know what, that voice is fantastic. We've heard everybody else's voice for years, you know. Let's have somebody who has that great basso profundo and that texture, but we've never heard him before. I mean, outside of the genre, nobody. Candyman, I love Candyman. I love that movie, and just hearing him and seeing him. By the way, I'm sure you've met his hands are massive. You shake hands with him, it's like crawling into a cave. It's just, and Tony's great. You know, you obviously you know him. He is a very unique and gifted guy. But also, look, calling it Final Destination is pretty fucking stupid. How many sequels do you make to Final Destination? It speaks to the end right at the very conceit. So it was great that Bob
Evidently not.
Evidently not. Yeah, exactly. we keep we're like herpes. We keep coming back. Exactly.
Now, let me ask you about 2, because, you know, obviously people now look back at them as a franchise. But here's the thing. I remember the first one came out. Great movie. Great ending. Like, because obviously the Kerr Smith character was sort of a hero, but kind of a dick. And I watched the special feature saying, like, you know what, the audience wasn't fully satisfied. That was
fully is very kind. They hated it. They tore the seats out of the theater and threw them at the screen. They loathed the ending.
But you came back with a solid, really great punchline to what could easily have been a one-off movie. Okay. And then I remember maybe 2 years later, I'm at Fangoria Weekend of Horrors in Brooklyn, New York. And they are doing a little panel for this movie called Final Destination 2. You're like, oh, shit, okay. And I'll never forget it. The promo item that was handed out was the truck as a lighter. And for a moment, I'm looking around and I'm like, oh, my God, did they just hand a bunch of horror fans lighters in this place? This is dangerous. Like, everyone's flicking.
Did you watch the actual reel that we showed?
Oh, yeah.
Because I was there for it.
Oh, then I met you then.
Yes, I was there for that. And I remember, I think Tony Timpone was backstage back there. Yeah.
But that, I felt that won all of us over, because I remember thinking, like, we don't really need a sequel to Final Destination. I like the first one, but come on. And you guys showed 2 things. You showed the highway crash
in its entirety,
which blew everybody in the place the fuck away. I still think it's the best of all 5 movies. I think that's like the best orchestrated and put together scene. Showed that, and then
because it's very practical. It doesn't feel CG, even though there's not a single real log in the entire sequence.
The funniest thing is, on the way home, because I drove there from Long Island, so the one thing that you remember is like the bottle falling behind the brake as she hits whoever. So I'm driving on the way home with my buddy Jay, and Jay drops his Snapple bottle, and we're just completely quiet for a second, and then he's like, I'm just going to pick up that bottle. Like, yes, please.
Well, a lot of people died that way. Like, it's one of those things you always think about when you're in a car. But like, I think Albert Camus died that way. The director of All the President's Men died that way.
Yeah, Pakula.
Wow,
and somebody
really?
else. There's like at least 3 major people in arts that I know of that have died with like a log or something falling off the back of a truck.
You had it falling off? No. I had something.
You.
I had a bottle get stuck under my brake
once.
It was like a plastic bottle, and you just crush it. Like,
Albert Camus didn't die from a bottle going under.
I was getting ready to say Albert Camus.
I'll work with that.
Wait,
he may have been on the bottle, but
so wait, Albert Camus died when something fell off
the back of a truck, and Pakula definitely died that way.
He was going over into the valley.
Oh God, and not always logs, but I think about it a lot, because when you're behind those kind of trucks, that's
why we did it. That's exactly
here in LA, but like on the East Coast, those logging trucks, especially in Virginia, we have the coal trucks, and I always heard like the hatch breaking and the coal just crushing everything behind it.
Well, let me write that down. That's good.
That's a good one. Right? Yeah.
Well, so my question about the sequel was like a lot of people.
Universal.
A lot of people didn't expect it. But once you started previewing, it was something that was like, oh, that's super cool. And the advantage to part 2, which unfortunately I feel the other ones are lacking, what I thought was genius was it actually wrapped up part 1
It tied everything
perfectly. Because it's like everybody in part 2 were people that would have been victims of the people in part 1.
Guess what?
Whereas,
what is the one scene the studio almost demanded that we cut? That scene.
Are you serious?
That was the target scene, because it was expensive to do toe work, and there was a lot of dialogue to like everybody. But we're like, no, this is the raison d'etre. This is why this movie exists. If we don't do this, there's no movie. And they capitulated, and I agree with you. I think if without that, we wouldn't be talking. Right. There would be no 3, 4, and 5.
Yeah.
Because it established a universe where there's reciprocity, where there's ripple effects. That if you find the right storyline, you can have it echo back to something from the original movies. And that was part of the fun for the subsequent movies, is watching these little Easter eggs as you're laying in echoes from all the other movies. You start to realize everything's connected. Everybody is connected, and every storyline could potentially be connected. In fact, we also had to reshoot almost every death on that one too, but it's a whole other story. But the sequence in Final Destination 3 at the end on the subway, originally we were going to have the surviving leads from 2 be on that subway.
Oh.
And we got one of them who said, I'm available, I can do it, but the other one couldn't just because of scheduling. If you can only get one, just don't do it.
Yeah.
So we just wound up figuring, okay, how do we stop it? And the head of international for Newland at the time was this German guy. And at the end of the first preview, he's like, I have the solution. We killed them all. I'm like, you can't say that in that accent at all, ever. But he was right. So Final Destination 3 was when we realized we can sort of wipe the slate clean of characters and start fresh, which is both economical, but also I think this keeps it interesting because exposition is everyone's worst enemy.
Yeah.
Once you have, I think 4 in particular suffers from this endless regurgitation of just backstory, which is just bullshit, which is why 5 was so refreshing because of the conceit of 5.
Yeah.
There was no backstory.
Yeah.
You just dropped the needle right where we wanted.
And yet it ties
but
back
I mean, that's the thing is, that's why I love 1 and 2, and I love 5 because those 3 definitely connect. 3 and 4, I've told you off record, I'm not a big fan of them because essentially they're remakes of the first movie. That's it.
3 in particular, if you analyze it, it is exactly the same structure, beat for beat for beat. Now, I happen to think that 3 is very well made, particularly that the whole subway sequence, we never shot in a subway. All of that was on stage. We built everything.
Wow.
There's one shot that is a stock shot where the subway goes overhead, and that was just a stock footage shot. We actually got the subway cars from Spider-Man shipped up to Vancouver.
Oh, cool.
And so we had one of them on, again, another gimbal. And then the other one was just connected to a tractor trailer. They would just wheel it into the station and then wheel it back out. And it was one of those moments where you realize that what's outside of the frame, it's amazing. You usually have a guy wearing cargo shorts going, when are we going to lunch?
But for me, the one of that is that Lawrence of Arabia. When you see some of the behind-the-scenes photos, you actually almost guffaw because you're looking at this epic frame, and then you see a bunch of people just sitting around, and there's like 4 people in a camel and a couple guys smoking. But it doesn't matter as long as it was in that tiny box. You're good. You know,
Wow.
That's the magic.
That's the magic.
The magic of it
That
all,
is
yeah.
the magic. So
I love the lead actress in that one. What's her name?
Mary Elizabeth Winstead.
Mary Elizabeth
Yeah,
Winstead.
she's awesome.
She's great in that, and
she's fabulous. Like the sequence where she cries in the train at the end.
Yeah.
Poor girl. It was, we were doing reshoot. That was a reshoot. She was trying, man. She was trying, and it wasn't coming. And like the makeup person goes, get some glycerin in here. And finally, Jim Wong was very smart. He goes, you know what, guys? I need a break. I'm really having I got to figure this out. So, you know what? Can we just take 5? I got to go figure this out. I'm really sorry. I kind of screwed up the day. Let me go figure. And he took it all on himself, but gave her the time that she needed. It was one of the smartest little, just slight directing
choices,
thing that allowed her. And she came back, one take, we were done. Because she just was, the feeling of it's all on me, pressure, extras. And, those are the moments that are the takeaway. It's not how much blood was spilled here and there. Those are the things that I really remember about a lot of these movies is the different. And another Jim Wong thing, there's that sequence of the first one after the plane crash itself and the camera moves up the roof and you see him inside the window, framed the window, and he comes in, his parents are there and he hugs his parents. We had an entire extra half day of footage to shoot in there. We did that up first, and Jim looks at it and goes, play that back. Okay, we're done. What can we pull up? He said, I don't need any of that other stuff. I've got what I wanted. Another lesson, if you just know emotionally what you want to impart to the audience and you feel like you've got it, go. Why hose your actors down with film? Move on.
What's the story behind this? Because I have a copy of part 3 here that you just gifted me. Thank you. And I remember when Blu-ray became a format, that this was big
DVD.
incentive. Oh, on DVD.
This was on DVD.
This has the choose their fate version. So you have the theatrical, but then a choose your. How does that work? I don't even understand. Did you just
you guys
have
do
extra
reshoots
footage?
for us,
No.
right? If we want you to.
Right now,
We
I
wish.
want this one to die.
Okay. Actually, there is people do live in the ones. This is what we came up with because DVD was just huge at the time. What can we do to help move units? And so home video gave us almost $1 million to shoot footage specifically for this feature on the DVD. And it went from different deaths, how they die, who dies at what point, and it was all cut into the movie, or the versions of the movie. And it's sort of like Dragon's Lair, where, you check the joystick up, you choose a path, you go through. But then there were weird little Easter eggs, like the character whose name I completely forget because I'm old and senile, with the video camera who was videotaping all the girls and stuff, you can actually go and access 30 minutes of what was on that videotape leading up to them getting on the roller coaster.
Wow.
And it's all about him looking in the mirror saying, I'm sexy. I know I'm sexy.
Oh, yeah.
I love it. And it's,
in other words, VHS, the movie.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, exactly. But what's great is we just let the actor go do it. It was all improv because he was a comedian in Vancouver. And so he said, just go be funny and do weird shit this character is. And he went off and did it, and it's all on the DVD. So it was more of a function of what can we do to push the format and what can we do to distinguish. I mean, we're on 3. You got to make it different. You got to make it something. And it worked. I mean, that was a enormously technically challenging thing to pull off. And because you're doing all your sound mix twice. Everything has to be output twice and sometimes 3 times with the scenes and whether it's used or not. But I thought it was really worth it. And we recorded score specifically for those sequences too.
So how many versions of this can I watch?
There's about 3 that if you go through that you can see that will be slightly different.
I'm excited.
That will be an article. Sounds like the thing.
I know. I'm going to do that for Christmas break.
That's out of all of them. That's the one I'd probably be most curious to rewatch right now because I've only seen it once and I didn't dislike it. I remember liking it. Just there were certain effect shots where I like my memory now of a roller coaster coming off or something was whether it's even a mismemory.
To me,
the shot you're thinking about. Well, 2 things happened. One, when it was in another lesson learned, when the marketing wanted it wasn't ready. So the one in the trailer is not fully rendered. It's not finished.
Funny. So that's probably what my memory is.
Exactly. And even better, because it was in marketing, we couldn't put bodies in the roller coaster.
Right.
So the cars were empty. Everything about it was silly. And it's much better in the movie. But there are some shots that are, I won't say dodgy, but they were hard to pull off in that opening coaster sequence. But everything in the movie I think is really well made, and it's just well done and well lit. It's just
what are the 1 to 5? What were the budgets of each one? Like the actual shooting budgets?
I'm going to say the first one was about after the rebate about 18. Second one was 25. Third one was 34. Fourth one was 47 with a $5 million reshoot.
Wow.
Oh, yeah.
And a big part of that was the 3D. That was the first time.
That was one of the first times. And we were competing with My Bloody Valentine. I mean, in terms of that. But we were also getting a lot of the sort of R&D research from Avatar. Like a lot of the cameras. We had the Sony F-35. We had the 4th and 5th camera body that had come off the pipe for that camera for these systems. But you learn a lot about 3D, and how we use 3D was not the way to use it. If you look at 5, that was a really good use of 3D. And it was the director.
One of the first 3D movies I had seen in a long time. I mean, I remember seeing Beowulf, but then there was a couple years stretch before I saw the Final Destination in 3D, and it was awesome.
That's 4.
Wait, that is 4.
That is 4.
Thank you.
Yeah. And by the way, for the people who hadn't seen it for years, you're like, oh, this is why there's elements I love. Yeah. But I think when you actually then go into 5, the way it's handled is just so much more intelligent and not. It was very cattle proddy in 4. It was like, look at us throwing shit at you.
That's why I love it so much. Is I did see it in 3D, and it was cattle prodding. You know how I love my cattle prods.
Where's that shower curtain?
But I've always kind of that was a really good screening experience, and maybe it was the 3D that just kind of made me go.
The thing I remember about 4, and you said before, the characters aren't all that in this, but by part 4, because I was excited because Justin Wellborn was in The Signal.
Love
with
Justin
AJ
Wellborn.
He got cast. He's like, hey guys, I'm in the Final Destination 4. I'm so excited. I look him up on IMDb, and his character name is Racist. And they're at the point where you look at everybody's character name is like, oh, nobody even has a name because it doesn't matter anymore.
You're just racist.
It's racist.
Why did you give up, Craig? Why did you give up?
That's
you know what? Here's what that was a strike. That was a strike script. The writer handed in. He emailed it to me at 11:59 before the strike was to start, and wherever he was, that's when it got done, and that was it. And that's, I think, half of the reason why it just is undercooked. It doesn't really hold together. Look, there's myriad reasons why this movie was a repugnant dry heave, but the thing that it did allow us to do was sort of a mea culpa, and I think 5 was a return to form. The frustration with 5 is that it was such a better movie, but we'd burn the audience. We kind of
5 was a real surprise because I remember I think I had only seen 4 and I saw all the others theatrically except 4, and so I've only seen it in 2D. I'd like to see it in 3D. And then I went to 5. I think I saw the 5 at the Chinese Man when it opened there, and I was expecting nothing except the typical fun parts.
It's smart,
and it was just as good as it was almost as good as the first. I felt like it had a lot of similarities to the strength of storytelling.
Best Lisa Loeb joke ever.
Yes.
No, it's a good movie.
There was no sign. I mean, spoiler again. There was no sign that movie was a prequel, except that one joke. And even then, I was like, well, who wrote this freaking movie? Who remembers who Lisa Loeb is?
No, the only one, and I remember seeing this with, I was in the theater. This is when I was in my PhD program in Richmond, and I saw it at the Bowtie Theater in Richmond, Virginia. And I remember watching it, and I was with Dave and Mike Koopmans, who used to work for Fango. And during one scene, I remember Mike lean over to Dave right next to me and go, "That phone is huge."
Yeah,
and that was it.
That was the biggest problem.
Fuck.
Like, we even researched the thin monitors that they have in the office, the old cathode. They were 4 months into offering them commercially. So we were able to buy the office and get away from what would have been a clear tip-off.
Yeah.
And there was one time the transportation brought a car, and the exec for the studio is like, "That car is 1 year out of date." Nope, that car. So we had to scramble. And there was a person who was working at the office building next door that we found. We used their car.
They were just driving like
they were just driving a random car, whatever it is. Just come on in. It was really everything in the movie is actually right where it needs to be. But the phone, there's what you can do. There's nothing you can do. So we tried to spin him to be a little retro. Oh, it was.
It did.
It worked because that character was such a
little
douchebag.
douchey retro. He's such a
an
cheapskate. He'd probably keep his old phone.
Yeah, and
he got
I buy
unlimited
that
minutes.
idiot who thinks he's so cool has that retro phone because he's too cheap to buy a new one or whatever.
It was,
but it worked.
But there was also one other slip up. And this, props their whole job. The gift certificate has the date when it expires. And when he opens the drawer, it's the actual date, and it's 2000. And if people are watching, they will see, wait a second, you got a couple of...
But nobody's even thinking that. That's the thing. No. You go into that movie not thinking that. You think you're seeing a sequel. Now, this is an idea I'm going to give you for free. Because by the time, so 3, 4 came out, and again, I felt like the formula was kind of similar. He's got his pen out. The thing about 5...
Is that what you call it, Rob?
The thing about 5 I was expecting that you just barely touch on that I would have loved seeing, and I want to know if this was ever a decision, because obviously you think we go into each new movie being, I wonder if we should do this and that or whatever. But and I even had the tagline. I was like, in order to defeat death, you must become death. I like the idea of like, all right, you're 5 characters or 6 characters or whatever it is. You beat death. You figure out that it's going to come and get you all. What if one of them decided, well, fuck that, I'm taking them all out before it can get to me? Like taking the role of death and killing off all the other people. And in part 5, it hints that because one of the guys is like, well, screw that. I'm going to start killing people.
If Tony Todd will drop this bon mot that if you take someone's life, you will assume the trajectory that they were on. You won't know when they'll die, but at least it won't be right now.
Right.
That was actually very helpful. In some ways, we should have feathered that in a little earlier in the script, to be honest with you. It was pretty deep into the story.
Yeah.
But let's just say that for FD6, the takes that we have explores exactly what you're talking about.
And for people breaking news stories, it's a 12-part HBO.
It is. No, it's going to be on Stars because they got Ash versus Evil Dead.
Honestly,
it's going to be
on the way here,
piece.
I was thinking how it would be really interesting, a TV version, because having like 10 installments of a story that could really take its time, then it would get
we pitched it.
Ultimately, we together.
We wrote an entire Bible for a TV show that was pitched internationally because they do better overseas, and the hope with that it would come back here. And we actually got a little nibble from a very small country saying, that's kind of interesting. Those movies did well here. But going from a feature to a TV show it's rare that it works. It doesn't work that often. And so people, I think, in terms of the comps, were a little bit scared. And also genre television at the time, because this was several years ago, we aren't having the explosion that we're having now. Yeah. And maybe you could go back, but also I think there's 1 or 2 more features we can sort of wring out of this if we're inventive. That was the one thing that was really, I won't say frustrating, but it was nice to see that they gave us the latitude to be a bit more creative with FD5.
Right.
I would like to try and work with the studio to push that to another degree, because I think we've rung that bell too many times. We have to.
You said you played out the audience with a 4. In terms of the box of office for 5. So you told us the budgets. What were the box rough approximates on each of the movies, just because I'm curious how they fit into
135 for the first
yeah.
one, 90 for the second one, 130 for the third one, 206 for the fourth one, and 175 for the fifth one.
So even the fourth one was like the least favorite, it made the most.
It made the most, which earned us the right to redeem ourselves. And I would argue that, when FD5 was $42 million and it made $175 million worldwide before any ancillary anything, with no profit participation, because they're all basically not unknowns, but they're not people going to get the piece of the pie. Why not?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Get another one. Like, why not go try and do a number one?
But for 2 and 3, those numbers must go up a lot for
home
DVD
video
and stuff. Must be
massive.
A huge part of those.
FD3, we wouldn't have done 4 if it weren't for the success of 3 and the sort of choose your adventure. They were massive. FD3 made $37 million pure profit. Just unfettered, unshackled profit.
But I do like
that. But according to
one,
the studio accounting, they've each lost $65 million plus
because of the marketing costs, which were $500 million.
And yet, of course, that's the statements I get. But when the executive says, "Oh, we made a killing of that movie," I'm like, "Really?"
Yeah.
Thanks.
But even though, so it's just interesting that the one that kind of worked the least was the one that made the most money.
Yep.
Which is interesting.
3D. It was the gimmick.
Yeah.
It was just that gimmick.
Wow.
That's NASCAR too, right? They're tying in the NASCAR.
Yeah, but I don't know whether that played as much of a component as we thought it would.
Yeah.
If anything, I think it forced, not forced, that's the wrong thing. It made us look at the characters as archetypes in a way that was unhelpful. It really did, because all of a sudden you're in a universe where there are certain expectations people have of the kind of people who attend that.
Right.
And it limits what you can do. And that was, I think, our own prejudices or preconceptions. And it was everything about that movie was a fail. Everything was a fail.
Except for the box office.
Except for the box office. And
it's crazy.
Yeah. So anyway.
But that's still important in Hollywood, right?
Rumor has it.
The box office.
That's all that matters.
Yeah. It's not like HBO where they just don't care.
Now, what happened on this thing? If you're free to talk about it, I'm fascinated by people who make these movies. How people like we have our friend who wrote a children's book, and then you don't get much from the first one because you sell, but then the sequel maybe you make money off or whatever. I'm so fascinated. Like, how do you actually make a living? You're as a producer, you helped create something, but how do you get paid to so you can live a life continuing making these projects without side jobs? Like, how do you not get cut out of the pie in this sense, or are you still navigating that yourself? I'm curious, because it is such a weird industry. That something could make $280 million, and somebody could say, "Yeah, we lost money," because they don't want to pay
because it's participation. Look,
yeah.
I right before FT2, I got my first profit participation statement from New Line for the first one. And we had lost, I think, $90 million. Like, oh, God. Okay. So I called, 2 weeks out of shooting a sequel. I called the executive, like, dude, let's just shut down now. He's like, shut up and cash your fucking producing check. I'm like, copy that, sir. I got it. Because that's just how it's going to roll. Right. So the only leverage you have, if at all, is you are attached as a producer. So you try to get as much money up front. You try and build in box office bonus. It's the job. Now, all the American Pie movies, save the last one, they're all in profit. They all kick off money every year. It's every year. Because that first movie cost $11 million.
Yeah.
And it made, $206 million worldwide in the first one. That was right again when DVD was kicking in. And the second one made $285 million. They couldn't hide the money. They couldn't actually put it anywhere. They were walking with their stuffed suitcases. They were, where are we going to put it? Hire a warehouse. We got to put the money.
And with American Pie, because of the DVD market, I remember every time one came out, it's like, well, here's the R version and here's the unrated version.
Yeah, I remember that too.
They hoard that out. I mean, and then the multiples and the collections. When we were shooting American Wedding, a 6-hour documentary about the making of the entire franchise. I shit you not.
It's like the Nightmare on Elm Street.
It was ridiculous.
Wait, was that like the fourth disc on a box set?
It was, but it was only available. It was actually 2 DVDs. It was only available for a brief time at Walmart.
Yeah, I think
as
I bought
a package. And then they pulled it off, and they pulled it back, and they wouldn't sell it or license it. I'm like, why? This is great stuff. It was like, hell, you get to go meet all the real people who inspired the real characters with the writer. We flew him back to Michigan. And we go to the actual hot dog place.
It had the real people.
It had a Mondo poster, for Christ's sake.
It was
the documentary.
It was wackadoodle. And I don't know whether it was, I think it was a function of they were like, well, let's pull this back so we can parse it out for DVD releases. Like they kind of let the horse out, and they grabbed the horse and pulled it back in. But it's never, because the DVD marketplace bellied out, they've never released it. So it's actually relatively hard to find. I only have one copy.
Huh.
You know,
I got to double check. I think I might have it too.
and you know, it is.
Now, before we tackle our topic, because obviously we thought we'd do best on-screen deaths in horror movies, I just need to know what's the kill list for the Final Destination franchise before you even do these movies. Do you guys get in a room by committee and think of the most horrible way to kill people using the most common household things, and then say, yes, that's in the next movie?
Yeah.
And also, I want to know if you came up with any.
Or do you pick
easy.
the kill and then say, I really want to kill someone with toothpicks. How can we set that up?
This is the interesting thing about this franchise is you come up with common places or experiences that feel like everybody could at least identify with themselves being there, know someone who's been there, or at least would wonder what it would like to be in that environment, and can picture it. And that's where we start. It's literally where we start. We say, what do we do here? Because the conceit of the movie is always the same. It's the locations that change and the manner in which people are dispatched. So for Final Destination 5, I came up with a gymnastics sequence because
one of the best.
I came up with the gymnastics sequence because I've always watched gymnastics and taken great pleasure in the artistry, the athleticism, but there's this weird voyeuristic undercurrent of like, I hope they fucking wipe out. I want to see that girl face plant on the balance beam. The balance beam is crazy. Who does a balance beam? Have you ever been in one?
Yeah.
They're horrible.
They're disturbing.
They're scary as shit.
It reminds me of sword swallowing, where you question, how did you start this?
Yeah.
Like,
what made you go,
the first time you jumped on one of these
this
things?
looks
I
good.
assume this is the same for boys. Like, I assume that all boys, when they reach a certain age, are either put into like soccer or football, or you have to go play softball or something like that. All girls have to do dance and ballet. At least they did in my town. So like,
does that transition into gymnastics as a part of cheerleading?
Well, it's gymnastics. You would do like dance or gymnastics or something like that. Like I did both and then transitioned into cheerleading. So I liked them.
So did you see horrific accidents for cheerleading? Because we talked about doing a cheerleading gag.
Yeah. Actually, I remember there was, I had a couple, but there was one game where we put a girl up in a basket toss, which is where you actually throw them up in the air, and everyone missed her. And it was just like the perfect fail where like 4 people are supposed to catch every single person, and then you have one spotter in the back and everybody just misfired, and she cracked her head, it bled, she left. So yeah, but like the gymnastics things, like I remember being so scared the first time that mom like pushed me into gymnastic classes. And you want to do it because all your friends are doing it, but then you're up there on the beams or on the high bars, and they're like, "I'll just flip over," and you're like, "Fuck you!"
Exactly. Like, I want to live. I want to live.
So yeah,
but that's prurient. That's also tapping into that sort of slowing down on the highway when you see a car crash, which is one of the reasons why when she actually dismounts and crashes, we tried to choose an angle that would duplicate where a TV camera would be covering the event, so that you would feel exactly like you would feel at home watching her face and do. I
think that's the one I was directly talking about when I talked about changing in direction, because you see the little thing spinning on that lands on the beam, and so you think that's going to play this like key role, and when it doesn't, they're the kind of moments that I don't know. For me, that gets me. That's
and to that end, like we talk about, actors and characters and casting, we spent a long time trying to find an actual gymnast. And there was a girl who was a level 9 gymnast in high school, and she went to USC for mathematics. She wanted to be an actress. She had one speaking role, but she knew how to do gymnastics. So we said, great, you're it. Threw her to training. She did all those gags. Yeah. That was really her. You know how you see somebody do a crazy thing and like they stand up in the frame? Yay, look at me. No, she did all that shit. That was her doing the dismount for real. Before the digi double took over. Terrible. It's to me, that speaks to we actually cared about the FD5 and did our best to make it the best. So in terms of kills, my gosh, Eric Heiser came up with he got the job when he said laser eye surgery. We're like, sold.
That one killed me because I've gone to so many optometrists before. It's like,
and now in terms of like we also talk about the stuff is roller coaster. Like, what's the opening going to be? It's a big discussion because the whole marketing campaign is going to be anchored around that. It has to be a thing that people go through and understand. We were talking before the NASCAR thing, and there was a sequence that we basically cut out of the movie where if you're in the balcony and it starts to shake and you're like, I'm like 50 feet above the ground. There's nothing underneath me. If this thing goes down, I'm just going down. And one of the executives said, this is a really scary idea. I'm like, I don't think it's pretty stationary, actually. There's no velocity behind it. Yeah, vertigo, but that's a one-note gag, and that's the only gag that we could play with the bridge sequence. And so a lot of the things we were trying and failing to do with that idea managed to be, again, baked into the bridge sequence, which, again, was something we came up with right off the bat. We're like, okay, here's this. They've also talked a long time about maybe doing a cruise ship.
Oh,
Which
yeah.
you could get away with, but I would argue a cruise ship is so big. When they go down, it took the Titanic an hour to sink in the movie. I mean,
I'll tell you why I don't think it's a good idea.
I agree.
Relatability.
Yeah.
No one's on cruise ships.
But
that's the difference. Planes. We're all on a plane. We're all on a roller coaster. We're all on a car. I feel like that's what is the essence of what you guys do.
The version I discussed that I thought could work is you have the ferry that goes to Staten Island.
That's different.
Where you see people who go every day,
totally
they go through, it's a little hook. And that way, when it gets hit by another ship, it could be over and like within 45 seconds, it's on its side because the other ship goes right over it. And you can intercut between them. That to me is the only one that has value. And I think that's interesting because, as I said, you see people every day. Like you go on one of those ferries and there's the people playing chess. They've been playing that chess game for 7 months. And there's the girl who goes and gets her makeup on every morning because she comes in sweats, she comes out in a dress. You get to know these people and then you have that sort of interplay amongst these people and then it happens. I think people would at least understand that and it would have enough of the sort of underwater trapped rotisserie. Let's put the ship over. But
were there ever pitches to go with the man-made things? Like we're in a world right now, especially in a news cycle right now, where Paris, man-made disasters, man-made terror acts that then ripple along.
It's always got to be like a natural.
It's got to feel like a natural, organic thing. We never wanted it to, but it has to be nothing that is a sentient creature. In other words, we can't have a dog go and start something because dog has free will, basically. Right. And we were trying. There have been many people saying, "What if a bunch of bees?" Like, no, I mean, there's a hive mentality. You might say that they know and there's been a lot of pushback because people think of the creepy crawly things. People get fucked up when they see things with divided thoraxes. They're awful, but they are also creatures with their own sensibilities, and we had to do our best to stay away from that. And it's been a constant push and pull. Like again, a dentist office. Like I think mostly a dentist office, a hair salon, which was I think a missed opportunity because it was almost good. Because the one gag that worked when you see the tip of the thing hit her eyelashes as they cut it, you're like, oh, that's true. And I was actually talking to somebody who was a stylist. I said, what's the worst thing? I had a girl, she came in drunk, she cut someone's ear right off. Because those scissors are snug.
God.
The lobe thing snipped it right off because she was drunk. I'm like, write that down, you know?
What are some of the worst pitches for Final Destination settings or worlds that you guys had come up with or had I'm just always curious.
We had a pitch from I think a guy who's he's a very talented filmer, writer, director, but he came in and pitched that one of the characters was an extreme sports enthusiast. I'm like, okay, that doesn't work because already the guy is jumping into dangerous situations that are apart from what everyone's experienced. Like this thing, like a YouTube video we watched for 5 seconds, then move on to the next. I understand what he was doing, but it was wrong-headed from a sort of central genetic place of where the movie needs to live.
And good for him because he got to do the Point Break remake.
No, but
same script, just different title.
But I did hire him on another movie 3 years later. But it didn't get made. But he's a very talented guy. And then look, the writers come in and pitch all kinds of things. We had one sequence that was set in a grocery store because we think everyone has to go shopping.
Sure.
That was the dumbest fucking sequence. It was terrible. And it was like 6 pages of ridiculous, like who dropped the mayonnaise jar in aisle 3. It was awful. It was awful. It was actually written for FD4 and thrown out. We had 9 different endings for FD4 that were all written, completely different. The bus ending was the coda for FD4, and it wound up being the sort of front piece for FD5. The things have moved around. We've moved these pieces all over this and repurposed them because you find a better situation to put them in.
Now, do you have like a file that you're holding
Absolutely.
on to?
It's grotesque. I can't walk. I walked into this room and I almost pissed myself. It was so scary because I imagine myself dying at every turn. I've really destroyed my life. It's very sad. This is terrible. But I want to turn the tables. Like, do you have a favorite death scene from these movies?
Yeah,
which would then I think transition into the actual subject.
Yes, absolutely.
What's your favorite kill from this?
Let's see.
And it can be more than one. I'm happy.
Yeah, I'm going to go for a few because I absolutely love the bus kill in the first one because that's the first shock one where you're like, oh, I didn't. Like that makes you jump no matter what because it's not just because it comes out of nowhere. I love that one. I love Jonathan Cherry's death in part 2. I thought was pretty awesome.
3 sharp cuts of beef, as it was described in the script.
And that was a direct result of the airbag going off, right? So that's more like a double kill. Like I like that because you're expecting one, you're expecting one, it doesn't happen.
She's dead, drops the cigarette, the gas that you saw leaking earlier goes back, hits the news van that has showed up from the start of the sequence. That was a fun sort of layered sequence. I appreciate that was fun.
Which number is the blonde guy and he's cooking and then he ends up
that's
outside
FD2 as well.
Ends up with the thing going right through his eye. That's amazing
Those
because that one took so many turns.
Yeah,
and you
you're
just
wondering
kept going
where
with
is it going to be?
Well, and if you look at the refrigerator, it says I.
Yeah,
the E falls off. Like there's a lot. That
fun stuff.
FD2 worked.
that's
FD2
great.
really worked because the
so
guys who
much.
wrote Butterfly Effect wrote that, so their brains really work that way, and they have a sick, fucked up sense of humor about them. So,
was there ever talk of bringing back Devin for the second one, or was that just out of the cards? I'm just curious because I know he sort of cameos, and you got Ali back.
You know what? Off mic. How about that?
Deal.
We can do that one off mic.
Well, as a producer too, that must come up a lot with that. I mean, even if it wasn't personal things, there's going to be financial things with getting actors back. I'm sure it's a whole different situation to keep us. Did anyone who has appeared in multiple? Has any actors appered in multiple or just small cameos?
Just Ali Larder.
Just
She's the only one who transitioned.
1 and 2.
But even Tony Todd, he was the voice in 3. He was not in 4.
Okay, all right.
But one of the things that I was pretty adamant about is look, we failed the fan base in 4. Let's not give them what they want, but give them what they need. They need to have that anchor, and Tony Todd is the anchor that connects those first 3 movies. Let's do it. And so we figured out a way, I think, to layer him in and also find that new narrative twist that he could impart to justify the entire.
Well, why do you feel you failed the fans with 4 when it was a financial success? I mean,
that doesn't mean anything. Movies make money all the time. Transformers makes a fuck ton of money. Those movies suck.
Yes.
So
true.
it's
agreed.
Very true.
Everyone tried.
You just felt it from
you
when it
knew
came
it.
out?
I knew it the moment
But didn't you just get in this game for the money?
No, pussy and drugs. No, seriously, you try to make the best movie possible. Nobody wakes up and says, "Today I will make a piece of shit." Yay! Everyone's trying to make the best thing possible. And as you guys know, having worked on movies, events are always conspiring to prevent that from happening.
Yeah.
So the fact that you got a movie made, period, is one for the win column, really. Just that it actually got made. The fact that it's good is a miracle. If it's great, okay, then you should just drop the mic and walk because it's so rare that it happens.
Well, but it made all that money, so why didn't the studio rush into making
They
another?
did. Why do you think FD5 was only 2 years after? Normally it was a 3-year cycle.
Yeah.
By the way, we found out they were making FD5 when a friend of mine, Ed Douglas. Ed Douglas, he called me and said, "Hey, so I was at Show West and Alan Horn announced your release date for FD5. That's great." I'm like, "He did? We don't have a script. We don't have anything. We have to start shooting in 5 months."
Because 4 was promoted as the final one, right? Because you were like, the final.
Do you know why?
This is the last
Because
one.
everyone was like, "This sucks. How do we Shanghai people into actually getting an opening weekend out of it?" Honestly, it was that crass.
Did they push you guys to move more quickly, like a Saw film where it's like one a year?
Well, no. They once the movie made that much money in the international marketplace, while DVD was kind of going this way, international was going this way. So Alan Horn said, "Great." He planted the flag. I called the execs at New Line and said, "Dude, I didn't know we were starting." They had no idea. Nobody knew, but Alan Horn said, "I am planting my flag like Iwo Jima. Here we win." So suddenly, Eric Heiser, who we had sort of been talking with, and the studio was like, he had to write a draft in 2 weeks. He had to go from an outline he was working on to finishing a complete draft in like 2 or 3 weeks. So we would have time to prep. And even then, that movie, we had 7 weeks to prep the movie. That's a massive logistical undertaking to do in that few time, mostly because we knew how long the visual effects would take to get done. It was a very challenging thing. And yeah, it was a 2-year cycle. That was great, but it was a success, but not as much domestically, which means the studio didn't make as much money because their deals with each territory, it's not the standard, not as strong and not as beneficial. No, they made money. Let's be honest. Of course, they made a shit ton of money, but they didn't make a shit ton enough money as the last one to make them immediately jump into the next, regardless of its quality. It's the only FD movie that's actually fresh on Rotten Tomatoes. Was the
prequel idea always from the get go, or did that come along while developing it?
Well,
consider how fast it.
The fact that it was a prequel is something that we talked about earlier, like going back to FD3 with that ending, like bringing and tying them all back in, was something that was already, well, how do we tie it up? What if we did this? The fact that it became a prequel, I honestly don't remember. I think Eric Heiser discussed it at one point, but it was sort of like taking 3 or 4 different ideas, putting them in the blender and say, well, what if it's that? And sort of jumping backwards, which of course changed the entire production design. Like everything about the movie had to change once that conceit was in plane. And initially we never wanted the plane because we couldn't afford it. We just saw the plane going off and it blew up. And we're like, wah. So we had to go through a lot of budget and schedule contortions to figure out how to actually shoot not a 60-seat plane, but it was as big as this room. That's as big as plane as we had.
And then cut to footage from part 1.
That was my idea. That was my idea. I said, we got to cut. I said, let's do this. I pulled all the dailies because I actually had half-inch versions of the dailies from FD1
because that looked like new footage. That's the thing. I don't remember that angle from the original.
And I told wardrobe, get as close as an approximation of wardrobe and have them pass in front of frame so that you can match action, and that's going to tie us into this thing, and people will never question if we do that. It's just how Jaws, the push, you do the yellow, the red, the blue. So we did it, and it worked. It worked in ways we tried actually even discussing what if we dimensionalize these shots, but if you look at them closely, they're not in 3D because they go by so fast that to spend the money to actually make them 3D, the studio's like, fuck it, no one cares. I'm like, done.
That's
all
true.
Right.
And do studios want you, as the producer of the first one, to still be there by the end? Or are they trying to replace you as quick as they can? Do they see that you do a good job and keep you around, like on franchises especially? Because I imagine that if you are sticking with something, you're getting a better deal each time, which they might not want.
Not entirely. I mean, you're not entirely. And also they can say, oh, well, we don't have to make this movie.
Right.
You want to do this? You'll get less.
Right.
And so you have to figure, do I make something or make nothing?
Right.
And it's so hard to get a movie made. Yes. Yeah. And they can't do it too much. And usually if you're agreeing to take a haircut up front, they have to make you whole somewhere on the back end.
Right.
So,
and you've proven yourself. That's what I'm wondering. Like, if you prove you can do a job well, why do people want to cut people out? Like, and I'm not talking about you specific. I'm talking about
in general.
I'll
tell you exactly why.
Yeah.
If you have 10 people and 3 make a lot of money and 3 make little money, and you're going to look at that department, you're going to fire the 3 people who make the most money because it doesn't matter what they know or their experience. You have the middle people who are desperate to actually take that. You give them a little bit of a bump, and then you get rid of one of the 3 on the bottom because those people are expendable, and you make them. It's just economics, and the sad thing is I've been in situations where, man, you see the human resource people walk into the conference room and close the door, and then everybody's door shuts because they know they're getting that long walk down to be told, here's a pink slip. It's unpleasant, but all right, American Reunion. There was a huge move. Okay, I'll say it. Cats and Dogs. Literally, John and Glenn came in and they pitched it to us, and it was originally going to take place in the White House. Okay. Well, I would imagine that cats and dogs in the White House would be spies. It doesn't surprise me, but I want to have like a Gary Larson cartoon where like my cat or my dog is a super secret agent that has a whole secret life. Like, that's awesome. So we turned the pitch. I was in the room. We pitched it to Warner Brothers. Romanoff put it off to Warner's Animation because the technology wasn't really there. I stayed on the draft, developed the whole thing, took it all the way to the point where we had a director on board. We were about to prep the movie, and then someone else I was associated with got into a fight with another executive at the studio, and they tried to kick us off after me spending 19 months keeping this thing together. And you kind of put your heart and soul into it. You kind of figure out how it works, and you're looking forward to the challenge. And you know everybody. You know it from the director, the writers, the other guy, everybody. So the executive said to me, you know what? You're collateral damage. As long as you're associated with that other guy, you are collateral damage. And that's a very interesting lesson to learn.
Yeah.
You know what? It's maybe not even about you. I don't dislike you, but because there's a dynamic there, you're fucked and I'm sorry. I had another guy who I spent ages getting this script ready with this guy and sold to Disney, 5 Against a Million. And gosh, I can't really mention names here, but they got a huge writer who was associated with this called me and said, just so you know, because you've always been nice to me, we are going to fuck you guys hard. You are not going to get producer credit. You're going to get bumped to EP credit because I'm protecting this person who happens to be my wife. And I'm only telling you this because you're a nice guy and I like you. I'm stabbing you in the front.
Wow.
Because you've earned it.
Wow.
And you know what?
That's right out of the player. I mean, it's just like, it's lifted. If you're going to call me a fucking asshole, make sure you do it to my fucking face.
Exactly.
Malcolm McDowell's line in that movie.
And I have to say, I walked away from that interaction not really upset because he had the nut to actually tell me to my face, respect that he was going to say, I'm going to do it anyway, but I'm going to give you the respect. So anytime a circumstance has to come up where, not that I'm actively going to fuck somebody over, but a situation where it's going to go bad for somebody, I will try to always be the guy. If there's someone who needs to be let go, I want to be that guy. Right. I don't want to give it to somebody else because then I am not deserving of the position that I'm in any level.
Was there something, though, to tie you, like is there a safety clause to tie you to the final destination? So you at least have the option to make them?
Here's the trick. If you do not make a sequel within 7 years after the release of the last installation, they can fire you with no cause.
So if you make,
I gotta move. Yeah, slap that horse and get it going. Because
what can we do to help?
Final podcast.
Well, all I can say is there is, as you said, anticipation, situation, things that are uncomfortable. I was working with a writer. We came with 3 different takes for another one, and there is one of the female characters has a gynecological exam. That is the most disturbing, and yet nothing happens. That's what's great about it. Everybody sort of fears
kind of sums
weirdness,
up every
anticipation.
gynecological exam.
Exactly. You think all the horrible things, and you think dead ringers. Yeah. And then, like the dentist's office, we had a little spin on it. So we're just playing on people's really unjustified anxieties and fears on both men and women. And it was awesome.
It's the tray of instruments. You always walk in, and it's like the dentist where they have this tray of like these god awful looking instruments laid out, and you're just like, where the fuck does that go?
Yeah, exactly.
And then,
and yet I would bet
it's over in 5 seconds. And then you're like, oh, okay.
Do you think? But I would be guessing.
So you just put all this out to fuck with me.
Yeah, that's it. It's like when you walk into the dentist and they have this tray of like poking devices, and you're like, where does the gouger go?
How does that scrape anything off my teeth, my flesh?
But then they never use it. And
but I bet you in a room, the guys are going to be the ones who squirm more than the woman. Because they have no idea what it is.
By the way, that's exactly what we learned. It's like most of the women are like, that's true. Oh, that sucks. But the guys are like,
it's just your imagination
turned
going
into a knot because guys are stupid. I mean, let's be honest.
It's true.
We are.
Look, all we have was sometimes cute and occasionally funny. We got nothing else. We're just fucked over. We got nothing else.
Spoiler goes downhill with age.
Spoiler alert for Final Destination 6 whenever it happens. There
well,
you go.
We'll see. You know what? We had a sequence in the spa sequence in FD5. Originally, he was having a colonic. And the machine backwashed and shoved like 70 gallons of excrement up his ass, and it exploded.
Sophomoric.
And it was, and he blew up and exploded like Mr. Creosote. And
Eli Roth, Final Destination.
We handed that into the studio, and there was just like, take it out. It was so awesome. Oh god,
see that as a trailer.
All right, well, going to our topic, you guys haven't given
kills.
us, but you haven't given us your favorite Final Destination kills.
I did actually tell.
What was yours?
Mine. I mentioned it before. The tanning bed.
Tanning bed is
I
great.
absolutely loved that one just because it came out when I was in college, and it reminded me of people that I was actually like roommates with. And even
did you hate them too?
Oh my god, yeah.
Fucking
oh my
tanners.
god, just like tanning while sitting
there. A friend
there.
of mine was roommates with Ted Cruz.
Ted Cruz.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
In Canada?
No. Yeah, he was roommates and just said he had horrible body odor, was an asshole then, is a bigger asshole now. Thank you very much.
Wow. No, I loved that scene so much. Well, one, I remember they were listening to the Red Hot Chili Peppers song, and I loved it because they were kind of like dancing while they did it. Like it was a fun like girl date for them. But the Slurpee thing did it for me because the 2 roommates that I had at the time, they would starve themselves all day to go to Starbucks and get these massive things. And I used to mock them.
The 5,000 calorie things?
I called them apple pie lattes because I swore that's what it was. But they would starve themselves so that they could go get these like apple pie lattes, and they would drink them constantly. They always had these massive cups of like iced beverage in their hand. And so I just thought that scene.
It's like me with purple drink.
Struck.
You know?
Yeah.
I got my styrofoam cup. And you?
I had we talked about one. Tanning was on my list. My main notes here were gymnast, FD5 era gymnast, Stifler's beheading because it was Stifler. And that was actually a big part of it for me because he's one of those guys you want to see him take it out. But also what I loved about that one, and you kind of repeated in maybe what's the one with the mother gets the rock through the eye?
That was FD4. That was
which I actually like that death. That's actually really fun just because it's playful. But by that point, it doesn't feel real anymore. You know, it's not tied to the real. Right. But what I liked about the Stifler's one is that's something I've thought about a lot. Like when I see a tire go over something, or I wonder like, if that thing ricochets and it hits you, that's going to hit you with a real force. And I remember it just like the way it hit him. It was a great moment. And then I think anything in the first 2. I can't remember them all, but the ones that were more Hitchcockian, the ones that played out longer. I think that's why I like the shower. The guy the one where the guy ends up downstairs.
He's got his hand inside the garbage disposal.
And also, I mean, the swimming pool one's pretty. In terms of like what you're just talking about with the toilet thing, it's kind of like the reverse of that. I think that's playful and fun. It's not the kind of thing that scares me because it's, you know, it's kind of ridiculous, but to watch
But
as
based on
orchestration.
truth.
Really? You would really get sucked in with that
John
power?
Edwards, actually, our former Lothario presidential candidate, made his fortune defending an 11-year-old girl who was disemboweled in a pool.
Jesus.
So
That
that's
is
all
true.
That's right.
That's
He is
true.
it's a lawyer.
Wow.
That's how he made the bulk of his money, was that particular case.
Wow.
So most, if not all of the things actually happen. The getting ground up on the escalator, I know what happened in China. You probably saw that video.
Yeah.
It actually happened in India with a little kid when they were going down, and the adults were stepping over, but the 8-year-old girl got ground up to her neck because she couldn't see because she was sandwiched between her parents, and she's crunch. So most of the things that have happened for real. We've maybe extrapolated or sort of like built out from it, but it's all based on which I think why some of these set pieces really do work, because there's an undercurrent of that kind of could happen. Maybe that has, and YouTube has given us a terrible window into the world.
Some fucked
Did you ever
up
see
shit.
that? There was that one video cut up, and it was just people just survived. Like people
Yes.
almost being
Oh my God.
And I just couldn't even believe what I was
couldn't
watching.
either.
That
That was
Arabian guy
amazing.
with a
Oh my
plate glass
God.
fell off the skyscraper
Just
and literally hit him so
unbelievable.
close, knocked off his little headdress thing. But there's like one of those like
And he
8
just
by
looks
10
around.
panes. He's like,
Yeah,
what
he's
the
like,
fuck
what?
was that? I'm like,
That's the scariest thing I've ever seen.
And the reason
That
it's so
video.
scary is because those are on camera.
Yes.
the amount of things that have happened not on camera,
I know.
astronomical.
That's true.
It's
I
just
hadn't
like when
thought
there's
about
police
that.
brutality and it's captured on camera. I'm like, well, that's a bad sign because that
That's
means
no
it's
good.
happening a
And the
thousand
only
times
reason I
more.
could watch is because I know they all survived.
Yeah.
That's
Oh,
true.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's
so
true.
horrific.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
You don't
true.
want to watch the version who died.
Well, for just very quickly for me, it is also the gymnastics, but I also little Timmy getting squished by the plate glass.
Yes,
in
part
FD2,
two, which
Yeah.
was the
It's
other
just-
scene you guys showed at
Yeah,
Fangoria.
well, we
Yes.
ended with that. We actually showed that thing, and that's how we get it. Because in the trailer, you don't see it, but we
Yeah.
said, "Screw it, keep it," and then we went on to a little montage. So anyway, yes.
right.
So onward to some
Yes.
of our fave
Yeah.
death
Please,
scenes.
yes. God help me.
God, this is going to be
do this.
anarchy. How do we do this?
I'd say let's just go through our
Here's what I would
list
say
each.
though: is a lot of the slasher movies are slasher movies. We all kind of know what those things are.
Yeah.
But to me, you could start with, okay, what's a really interesting kill? Frankenstein throwing the girl into the lake at the beginning.
Oh, yeah.
Like there's
Yeah.
a kill that really shocked people and was unexpected. It was character based, and it was a left turn, and he walked away thinking something totally different.
Yeah.
So you talk about how do you construct these sequences? Killing people, there's a lot of ways to kill people, but the sustains, the atmosphere, the things that really make those sequences come alive and come and work. That's, I think, what's going to make it go through. Like we could talk about, people getting lots of things in eyes. I had a whole list of
Eye
eye
violence.
shit is just awful.
Eye violence
man.
is the worst. Yeah. What's the one with, is it not the Beyond? Is it the Beyond? No, it's in Zombie, right?
Zombie.
Yeah, Zombie
Zombie
2.
is the most, Zombie 2 is the most horrific eye violence on
My-
film, courtesy of Lucia Fulci.
There's a short scene in Ills, the French film, Them,
Yes.
where the guy's looking into the keyhole. They reproduce it in Hollow, the one that I saw just last
Don't
weekend.
spoil
No,
it.
Yeah.
I'm not. I'm
Gotta
just
try to
saying there's
watch
an
it.
eye thing. But yeah, in Ills, there's this scene where he's looking into a keyhole, and then the people who are chasing him kind of stuff something through as he's looking through it. And it's just shocking and just gut wrenching.
But even look at the original Evil Dead. Ash is held up, thumbs in the eyes,
Yeah.
squish,
Yeah. Anything with eye violence is always a little questionable. I have a bunch. I mean, like, obviously, why don't we just throw out the absolute classics that everybody is going to be like, oh, well, yeah,
Psycho.
of course. Well, yeah, Psycho, the shower scene is one of the most, obviously shocking. And still to this day, you watch it and it's still effective. It might not be scary anymore, but it's still, in terms of the filmmaking craft, you're like, wow, that's amazing what they're doing there.
But it's also narratively shocking.
Yeah.
It's not
Yeah.
just shocking for shock's sake. The fact that they had the audacity to kill her off at that time was just completely anathema to how people would think that character and that actress would be treated.
And how many other movies have implemented that? Obviously, I was going to say Scream. I always thought that Drew Barrymore's death at the beginning of that movie was
Stroke of genius.
It was stroke of genius and overly violent for movies that time. That
I
you're like,
watched
you
it.
really felt it.
Yeah, when she's getting stabbed, it's just brutal.
Yeah, and she's crying while her mom walks in the background. It's a beautifully orchestrated scene. Other classic ones, just throwing them all out at this point. Obviously,
Alien.
Alien is unbelievable, and that's one that scarred me as a child.
Yep.
Just that character.
Which one?
Alien.
Kane.
My namesake?
Kane.
Say it again.
Kane's death is
Yeah,
by far the most shocking one of the Alien franchise. I mean, it's funny like how By the second one, it's desensitized the whole thing. But like, just I don't know what it is. Just the
it's the mundane. They were just having dinner. It was so
it just happens.
non-eventful, and it became an event.
Yeah,
and how it was shot.
I also
too.
think it was those reaction shots where they talk about on the documentary how she didn't really know the blood was going to be on her. And it's just a great scene. And I think it's also the lighting. Something terrible's happening in this bright white fluoro, and it's just everything the opposite of Dread.
Oh yeah,
which is so different from most horror
and
films.
it's interesting too because that's the one location in the ship that isn't rusty and
wet
and filthy. So they really
clean.
That
and the way
contrast
that blood
there.
looks, that blood is one of maybe the best looking blood I've seen in a movie, where that red is red when it comes out of
when
him.
it squirts out.
That's the lighting.
I think The Omen, the original The Omen,
Sure.
the beheading of Jennings, the David Warner character, is one of the most spectacular death scenes. Every time I see the movie, which is every couple of years, and what I love about it is Richard Donner repeats it like from 3 angles.
Yes.
So it's like, just in case you missed it.
It's like Tony Scott shooting an explosion. Again, one more time.
Let's just make sure that you saw how fucking awesome that beheading was. That's, so that's one of my all-time favorites for sure.
The defibrillator in the thing.
Yes, absolutely.
You can't even begin to question
Definitely.
the layers.
That's definitely
of
the best.
Quentin Jaws was the big one for me.
Oh,
just because
God,
it was so kind of.
You
knew it was coming, but it came out of nowhere.
And you know what you love at that
he
point?
fought.
You love,
It's because he fought. He's
Yeah.
kicking.
Yeah,
You think,
he's like,
he's
so
going to get away.
kicking
He's
the
quick.
shirt.
He'll get away.
Yeah.
the characters you love
What's
that
Moby
fight,
Dick?
and
Yeah.
you're like, I can't believe it, and it's so shocking and fast, and he spits out. So is that spit, like when he spits out the blood, and you're like, oh, it's fucking
then
over.
you know.
Yeah.
If I had to choose one image of any image though, like favorite death in any movie ever from a pure image, not a horror film, it's the face melt in Raiders.
I got that one written down.
That thing, like when I saw it, because also when I was younger, when I saw that than most of the horror films, but seeing that image was just like, my God, that it just melted. It's not like how it would look with CG, it's just
And
amazing.
he was still screaming.
Yeah, he's
you
still
get the
screaming.
sense he was still alive as he was
and
melting.
it's like the greatest MacGuffin ever.
I always
like, you don't know what's in
hid
it.
during that one.
It's just that, and then Temple of Doom later also, almost.
I was too busy
got as good.
masturbating. It was
Which is replicated in Big Ass Spider with what's his name? Adam has.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
his
yeah,
face
the
more or
face
less
melts.
melts. Cameo. Yeah,
I'm going to go for when Dwayne gets shot at the end of the Night of the Living Dead.
Yeah.
You never imagine that he, given
Yeah.
what he's gone through,
Yeah.
is going to take the bullet.
And the thing that really sells that, because I just rewatched both Night of the Living Dead, the original and the remake, which I'll talk about in a second, is that's the shocking part, but then all those still images that come over the credits of them just dragging his body out, throwing it into the fire. And like, it's just like, it hits you enough that he died because you love that character, but then those stills are just so, like, it's like fucking hammers
But
it
this
into you.
goes to what I was thinking about coming here, like what you say, what makes a kill great? It's not the blood. It's atmosphere, context. It can be clever. It can be funny. I mean, I have ones that were the funny ones for me, like the chainsaw drop in American Psycho.
Yeah,
it's great,
It's
but
funny.
it's funny.
Yeah. Like
So-
I have Paris Hilton in House of Wax.
Yes.
Which everyone,
Yes.
and I remember when that movie came out, their promotional
Everyone cheered.
their promotional T-shirt said, "Watch Paris Hilton die."
Wow.
That was their selling point at that point.
Or and this one, it's also one of my favorite films. But Samuel Jackson's death in Deep
Blue
Blue
Sea,
Sea.
it's on my list.
He
That's-
shows
that's
up
funny.
and-
Shocker.
It's so
Shocker
funny because
scene.
I hated that because of the CG. Like that was the moment in
It's
the
a
movie where I was like,
terrible
"What?
CG.
Oh, this is stupid." But that was just me. I was like, I'm no, I'm
no,
in the
but
But you know,
majority of it.
I agree with you.
speech?
That's it's terrible CG.
It's the jumping
It's
the
like
shark.
there's
Literally.
something.
Yeah, literally.
Okay.
yeah.
I think it's because he gives the traditional Samuel Jackson.
We're gonna come
inspirational-
together.
We're gonna
Do
Did I
this
miss,
shit.
just because I missed a couple of minutes at the start. Did I miss Tina? And
No, we haven't gotten there yet. You missed
I'm
the
actually
original
not.
Frankenstein throwing the girl in the lake.
oh, okay.
I want to do franchises. We're going to go through franchises in a minute.
okay.
I think that'd be the fun.
And we
my
can do the
favorite
more
from
indie stuff
franchises.
as we
Pee
go.
Wee
We'll get to
Herman
that.
and Buffy, I absolutely love. I
In
don't
the original one, Paul
Yeah.
Rubens.
That's what he does. Is ooh,
That's right.
Funny, I hadn't even thought about
It's
that.
like
That's
one
great.
of my favorite
That's
death
great.
scenes ever
That's
because he just
funny.
keeps coming back.
Okay, how about Mrs. Deagle and Gremlins? Zoom, out the window.
Yeah, that, as
That's
a
a
kid,
great
that was one of my
one.
favorites.
And,
for
and
sure.
almost like if you're a kid watching it, like, yeah. You know,
I bet
kinda
that
waiting.
planted some Final Destination in your brain.
A lot of
Because
things.
it's almost
dude.
like Gremlins. It's almost like actually what your whole franchise is what Dick, what's his name, is going on about the whole movie. He's like saying,
Yes, the Dick
and it's
Miller.
Gremlins.
Dick
and I
Miller,
think
yeah.
Dick Miller is kind of saying there's gremlins in the things, and that's what's making technology not work. It's kind of what it's about.
It's very true.
Well, on my Savini kick, really quick.
Okay.
So I watched
The helicopter shot.
Well, no, I'm going to get to. Well, hold on.
Okay, sorry.
We all have different ones.
Not even in the movie, but Tom Savini is the king of the headburst. So
Sure.
Maniac.
Yes.
That's great. That's
him
one of
and
the
Maniac
best things
is
ever.
one of the greatest of all times. Now, on Night of the Living Dead 1990, which is a movie that he directed that I like a lot.
Yeah, it's a cool movie.
There's a lot of great effects gags, but a lot of them were cut out. So not on the Twilight Time Blu-ray, but on the original DVD release of it, there is like a 30, 40-minute documentary about the making of Night of the Living Dead 1990. And there's about 2 to 3 minutes where he talks about him and George going up against the MPAA. And they show you raw footage from the movie. And on par, but not as great as Maniac, there is one moment where William Butler jumps on the back of the truck with his shotgun. A zombie walks up. In the movie, he pulls up, shoots the shotgun, it cuts. But in the deleted footage, you see him blow the zombie's head off a la Maniac. It is an amazing thing. And I'm hoping somebody put this on YouTube. And if not, I'm going to do it at some point.
I just don't understand why, since there was clearly like a dozen head kills like that, why 1990 was the year they said, nope, we're done with head kills now.
It's just, if you look at the late 80s, early 90s, they were just so, the MPAA was just so hard on all these franchises. Freddy, Jason,
because
Michael
it's not going
Myers,
to come up because it's not a
Leatherface.
horror film, but it reminds me of that, and it wasn't on my list till just now. But spoiler, Wild at Heart. Willem Dafoe's expiration
Great. Oh my
is
God.
one of the great self-inflicted gags of all time. I mean, it's just amazing.
No, unbelievable.
Totally.
Okay, all right. If you go to a non-horror, Caligula with the head lawnmower.
Oh, yeah.
You know?
That was insane.
I always like the ones when you least expect it to, like the one Cachet, which is the French film.
Yeah.
It's really only got one death in it, but it just comes out of nowhere and you're not expecting it, and it's so sudden.
Yeah, you're talking about like sometimes it's Hitchcocking build-up, but sometimes it's the randomness and the quickness it all happens. I think violence often happens really quickly. In real life, it's blindness. Like it catches you, and because you're not waiting for it. Dread is like you waiting for it. Somebody's chasing you or following you, so you have a dreadful build-up. But when violence is, somebody actually jumps out of the bushes and grabs you, it's out of nowhere. And
have you ever been mugged or anything like that?
Oh yeah. I've been mugged. I've been hit by a car.
So you literally have been in that place
where your brain speeds up and kind of accommodates. So you actually do. It does slow down time in a way. Your mind does to help you deal with the situation. Exactly. But I find it really interesting. Like and I think that works best with, say, bullet gags where something gets shot, like say the beyond the head exploding. It's these when somebody shoots something or fires a gun. It's best when it's real quick and the violence is just like boom and out rather than lingering on things.
Well, it's To Live and Die in L.A.
Yeah.
When he gets shot, the camera keeps moving.
Real surprise.
It's such a shock.
Well,
that was actually a
There was
shock to me when I saw the film.
An American Horror Story this season. Are you caught up?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. The one where she slashes the guy's throat and it kind of comes like, they're talking about how much they love each other, and then this throat slash just comes and you're like, what the fuck? And it ends the episode.
Yeah, it can be a real surprise.
That was a shock.
Regarding shootings, I mean, in terms of one of the most graphic to this day, courtesy of Rob Bottin, is RoboCop.
Yeah.
I mean,
I was going to say,
that scarred me for. I was way too young to see. I was like, oh, RoboCop's like a cool superhero thing. And then the way that they
disseminate him completely, take him down.
destroy Peter Weller is unbelievable. And then he still survives it for a little while longer.
But the pendulum swings where Emil gets hit by the car in like multi-hued, almost street trash kind of way.
Yes.
He explodes. He's melting.
Yeah,
that's probably second unit.
Wicker Man is always one of my faves.
That's when that comes out.
Kind of iconic.
Yeah, because Nicolas Cage and the Bees is like
the Bees,
pretty howdy. So we're still talking franchise, right?
Well, we haven't gotten to that.
Okay,
we're
but
still
if you
talking
go for
pre-franchise.
surprise, Father Karras.
Huh?
Coming to me, flash out the window.
Yeah.
You're not expecting that turn at that. In 1973, no one was thinking that was going to happen.
Okay, well, we're talking shock endings.
Yeah,
Let's just
Shock moments.
shock moments. Yeah,
And what affects me about that, having revisited it just recently for Halloween, is the few moments where the father is over his crippled body and he's bleeding out of his head, and you see him still moving, he's still alive, and he's trying to give him a blessing before he dies.
Yes. Yeah.
Like that to me, it's like the shock of the death is always something, but like if there's a little
humanity
emotional
of the
resonance.
if there's a twitch,
Well,
or
the
a
other
little extra
is,
something.
and I don't want to ruin it because probably a lot of people still haven't seen that. But the ending of Don't Look Now, all I'm going to say is I'm not even going to go there.
God,
But that's the only time in my whole life I believe I genuinely was sitting somewhere watching it. The Nighthawk or something in New York, the little theater, where my jaw literally went down. Like, and I don't mean like figuratively. I mean literally where I went. I couldn't
And it
believe what I
scared the
just
shit
seen.
out of me.
And
It
it
scared
literally
the shit out
left
of
me
me.
going, oh my God. Like I felt so bad. And so, watch that movie if you haven't seen it. It's fucking amazing. But like that's hard to do. And you have to care to do that. That's very much like Exorcist. Those films
You have to care.
Yeah, you have to care on those. Not all great deaths do you have to care. A lot of them are just a great
But this fun, like
Argento,
we'll get the franchise will come up.
Let's see
Like,
franchises. All right, so Nightmare on Elm Street. Favorite death in that whole franchise? For me, it's easy. It's the kid, the puppet kid in part
puppet
3.
kid.
Oh, really?
I
Sure.
just think it's the most inventive. It's like having the epitome of having a nightmare turned against you. It's like this kid's talent, and then he is turned into the thing that he does for fun. I don't know.
For me, Tina's just like
To me-
untouchable.
Wow.
How scary that is.
Tina
The
is
idea,
scary
especially when you're like a
because-
teenager starting to sleep with someone and you're in a bed with them, and then imagining that person's dead and you're the guy did, and
Yeah.
seeing her like dragged on an impossible thing is like I just love it.
and
I think
him
it's amazing.
down foreground going, oh,
Yeah.
it was that you can't. It's you've been in dreams where you can't help somebody, where you can't move.
Yeah, you can't
And
reach
that
and
to me
touch
was
it,
that
yeah.
captured that. I look, the deaths in Nightmare for me got fun. Welcome to prime time, bitch.
Yeah,
I mean, that's
yeah.
all great stuff, and it's very entertaining. But it doesn't have the deep sort of psychological
Yeah,
Freudian
yeah.
resonance that first movie had,
Yeah,
which
like Johnny
made it
Depp
just so. Yeah, Johnny
being
Depp.
pulled into
I'm
the-
your boyfriend now. I mean,
Yeah.
there's such, and again, you can't help them. Like bad things are happening, and you can't get out. You can't do it. She's behind the bars. It's so tragic.
They haven't been empowered yet by the storyline, but I agree. I mean, they get.
But then you
super
got New
fun, but
Nightmare.
it's
New
different.
Nightmare
Yeah.
is just so
See-
meta and interesting.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I liked it when they got fun. Like, it's not my favorite movie, but my
You're not
favorite.
big slasher.
I'm
person.
not a huge slasher,
so-
but I really liked the Q-tip one. Just because I thought it was fun.
Well,
I was like,
it's hilarious.
yeah, it was like, and his hearing aid like turns into a monster.
I mean, I even
and
like the one
things
with the
that.
heroin, the heroin on the.
Oh,
on those
yeah.
things.
Oh
We get
yeah,
to fun.
the Let's
But-
Get High.
but-
See, that's when
fun.
I started. I was
But
like,
that's also
okay.
really like ugly character based.
Yeah.
It is
So
really
yeah.
nasty.
But
That
that's
is a
when I
nasty-
started getting into it. I was like, okay, now we're getting creative. But when it was just like, death
Despite
and
my
brutal
feelings
shit.
on Freddy's Dead, I do love that kill in particular because it's so he puts the hearing aid on him, so now everything's really loud.
Yeah.
and then all of a sudden Freddy drops a pin, one
And then
single
the
pin,
handful.
and then the handful. He's like, "You wouldn't do that, would you, man?" And it's
Yeah.
like,
I
so
just
that's when
like
it gets
that.
really fun. Yeah. Sorry. So that's Nightmare. So you're going
Friday
with
the
Tina?
13th. I'm gonna go with Tina. Yeah.
Friday the 13th. This is an interesting one. What? God, there's so many.
See, that's the thing.
Favorite kill in the franchise.
God, that's hard on that one.
I know,
super
it's-
hard.
I have mine. Like mine, I wrote down Jason X head
The
in
nitrogen.
nitrogen.
That's fun,
I
yeah.
also like Jason X where he and it was a reference to the original to I think it was 7 where he's beating the camper against the tree.
Yes.
With the
but in
sleeping bag?
Jason
7,
X,
yeah.
he's beating the camper with the other camper.
Right. Yeah.
He's like he picks up one sleeping bag and is
Oh,
beating
Jason
one
X,
with
yeah.
the other. So I kind of go for the more comedic kills. So
Right.
I liked
I'm
those two.
conflating where Jason cuts 3 heads off at the same time. Which
Part
one was
6.
that? It's part 6. Okay.
Jason Lives. Yeah. That's a pretty good one.
I think the best kills are in 3 as a whole. I feel like, I mean, for me, it's like, for me, again, it's almost not close. Like, for me, it's the hand walker, because to me, that's.
Oh, God.
that's the best.
It's
that
also
is
the
a
sequence
great
is really
one.
good because one person's waiting for you, and then you're doing this weird stunt. And it was fun having Larry here to hear more about the guy who could
Yeah.
actually do it. But for me, I remember being a kid just going,
I think that might be the best, but I
Showed
have
his strength too, which
I have a 3-parter for Friday the Friday.
Nice.
Okay.
For
Nice.
different
Well-deserved.
reasons. I think the best goriest kill that in terms of execution is definitely in the uncut version of Jason Goes to Hell. The tent spike and splitting
Really
that girl
good.
in
I
half.
agree.
Oh, yeah.
It's just like you look at that and you're like that. You
I wish
can't
everyone could
top
see
that.
the scene because, like, we watched the other version right after. I was like, oh my
And
God,
it's cut. You
not
don't
even,
see it at all.
There's
It's
nothing.
but when you
this is a
see-
It's like the
brutal-
Lifetime version.
It is
so different,
unbelievable. So there's that one. In terms of being disturbing, I always loved, and I'm still freaked out by it. In part 4, there's the character Rob who's at the camp looking to get revenge on Jason because his sister went missing, which is essentially kind of what they borrowed for the remake. But there's a moment where they're in the dark downstairs and Jason pops up and he tells Trish to run and he keeps screaming, "Oh my God, he's killing me. He's killing me. He's and to me, it's like as a little
Off
kid, you're like,
screen.
you don't even see it. You just see Jason pounding on him in the dark and he keeps screaming out that he's getting killed. That was to me the most shocking. But my favorite, just because it's so bizarre, part 5, the sleazy one, which I still love. There's the guy that has sex with that amazing
leather
woman.
thing around his
the leather
head.
strap gets thrown around the tree, around his eyes, and then just gets pulled in. And
For me, that's
tightened
when it
around
doesn't
his
feel. It feels more
face.
like now it's the Prowler, not a Jason movie.
Yeah,
There's
but
something
I
about
mean-
it that's just ugly.
But
But
when
that's
you're
why
at
you
that
don't-
point-
that 5 was ugly.
That's why I
Yeah.
don't like it.
But that's my favorite in that franchise.
Maybe that because it is probably it taps into both. But what about gnarly? Like, let's transition to what is the gnarliest death that the one that really just was like, oh God, I want to shower both inside and out after watching it.
I remember. Well, I can't call
in
it
Friday.
But just in general, like just to hop off like the bigger thing.
I remember being in the theater and not expecting this and sitting there with my mouth open from Ghost Ship.
Oh, yeah.
I thought that was
scene.
one of the best. That's like top of my list for just orchestrating and the rest of the movie having nothing. Like nothing on it. It's really one of the worst starts to end.
I remember just being in the theater and being just, oh my God, that was amazing.
It felt like a Final Destination kill.
Yeah,
and it felt like a really high-end, virtuoso ship thing.
And then it went nowhere. But
it's pretty. I rewatched that today, and I was like, ooh, that's good.
I've never seen Ghost Ship, but everyone tells me that if they took that opening scene and put it at the ending, it probably would have saved the movie.
Oh, yeah, it's true.
Like, like, oh, the ending's amazing.
There was a discussion when the ending of Final Destination 2 wasn't working. They said, well, why don't we just put the car crash at the end? I'm like, how? How do you even do it? Like, how do these notes come about? Anyway,
and that's the same thing with this. It's that the tight line that kills everybody on the ship except one girl that is the catalyst for everything that happens for the rest of the movie.
I see.
So you can't kind of plop it at the end unless you're explaining how she survived and everyone
Wait, we're
else
still in
died.
franchise though, right?
I want to go back to it. We're now we're doing
gnarly. Like, what's
gnarly?
the one gnarliest?
To me, I've got it.
Yeah,
and it's so because I almost can't comprehend it. And it's so horrific, and I don't know why anyone would kill themselves this way. This is in David Cronenberg's adaptation of The Dead Zone. When the cop is who is the serial killer gets caught, he opts to kill himself by propping his scissors on like the counter of the I don't know, the sink.
It was by the bathtub. He put them on the fixtures.
He puts it, and then he like kind of decides, and he opens his mouth over the blades, and it's like he's going to shove his head into a pair of scissors like that. I don't know. No, that's the worst way to kill yourself. Wow. I don't understand that. And then of course and then you see the aftermath and he just twitches a little bit and you're just like, what the fuck was that? That's the gnarliest as far as I'm concerned.
And then there's just ugly.
Scanners, it's quick and it's kind of over very quickly. But I remember when I was a kid, I actually wrote about this on Blumhouse recently, how that I wasn't expecting and I was totally taken aback by it, but I was simultaneously fascinated. And I spent months, like I remember sitting in church with my parents. I remember like, I'm going to try to do this with my mind. And I would like sit there and try. I never learned how to do it.
You try to scan me.
But I'd like sit there and I'd be like, I'm trying to get inside your brain. And like, it's just, my neighbor sitting in front of me in church, but it's how I passed the time. But I was simultaneously fascinated and horrified by it.
Irreversible.
Sure.
That was one of the, in terms of like making me uncomfortable because it's set in a realistic world.
That's what I was going to say. To me, the ones that are realistic, and the world is realistic, and the situation, like The Hitcher, with Jennifer Jason Leigh getting pulled apart.
It's pretty amazing. The idea of it is so fucked up.
Yeah.
Well, the beauty of Irreversible is the fact that it's the magic trick aspect that you're in one long take. And I think that's the beauty of, again, Cannibal Holocaust, because you're so used to seeing this animal violence that by the time you get to the ending and it's inflicted on the people, your mind is convinced like,
you're totally in
damn, did they really just kill those people?
That's how it feels. It's just filmmaking. It's good filmmaking.
Fat Girl was one for me where the deaths, I mean,
it all happens at the end randomly.
Yeah, they're not anything special, but they're not supposed to be. They're just fucking brutal.
And they're just out of your life.
Yeah.
There's so many.
The pit of needles in Saw 2 fucked me up.
That's a pretty messed up one.
I don't love needles. I think who does? But just the trying to get out in every movie you make. Just
all right. So you did it. Saw franchise. Favorite.
You're welcome.
Saw franchise. That's when it all starts by the end to blend together for me. Even though
I
can't separate kills in that, and I've seen them all multiple times. But
I think
I really liked them when I started. But I don't know. To me, they're all kind of like I remember liking. I might have been like you. Number 2 was still the one that stuck in my mind the most. So parts of that, like I liked that sequence of them in there. But it's like there's that thing with the gunshots. It's like it's more about traps. To me, that's not really about the kills.
Right.
Well, to me, my favorite is in Saw 4. And I call it the scalp kill, just because I'm always a little picky when it comes to things involving the scalp. But it's like this girl that's got her ponytail is stuck in like this contraption, and it keeps pulling her scalp like off unless she can, unless the guy like gets her out of it or whatever.
Yeah.
And I just remember that one being like, oh, that's so horrific.
Actually, one thing I liked, this is when their stories to me stopped being good. Sorry, past guests who all wrote these ones. But I love the image of Donnie Wahlberg standing on a big ice block.
Not original to that.
And he was kind of slipping. And that, to me, that was like great Hitchcock.
Ilsa She-Wolf.
Originally taken from Ilsa She-Wolf of the SS. They have a dinner sequence with the SS where they have a naked girl in the center of the dinner table who has got a noose around her neck on a block of ice, and throughout the dinner it gradually melts.
No wonder
or as I call it, Thanksgiving in my house.
So
there's also like gnarly things. Like I don't really respond to them as much, but there's that movie, What Have They Done, Solange, and the kills that the person has witnessed are all just really. It's just like literally.
Can you really like that movie?
Not really, but
it's just kind of brutal and mean.
The build up is you just see a woman's legs parted, and then you see a black glove killer, and you just see a knife being shoved up, and it's just such a like it's there to kind of make an image so you'll remember each time it flashes back to that. But it's just like nasty,
But think of Sleepaway Camp with the curling iron.
Yeah.
Again, done as tastefully as that could be done, but just you're projecting onto that shadow all the stuff that goes through with it, which is why to me it's just gnarly because you're filling in the blanks.
I like Sleepaway Camp 2 when they're drowning the girl in the toilet of
leeches.
Yes. Pretty horrific.
Or just for because of random, but the little Puppet Master, the little leech girl, spitting leeches. There you go. You just said leeches, so Death by Leeches.
They're fun.
Look at us, we're like a bunch of like 12-year-old kids, like and I like this kill the best.
I'm curious.
Okay, hold on. Serpent in the Rainbow when he's in the coffin, the blood coming up. That fucked me up because it was just so
great image.
Just image and disturbing and claustrophobic and drowning. Every single sort of
things that get you.
Things that get you in one fell swoop.
I like that. I want to go to Halloween just quickly because mostly because the one I've always loved in that movie I don't imagine is like on many's list because it's just not like showy at all. But it's Annie Bracken when her face gets pressed up against the window of the car. There's something about that image that I think about that image more than anything in the entire franchise. And her death, because I like her the most. She's the character I kind of love and who I'd want to date if I lived in that world.
It's just like
it's the way her face. I think it's an image thing with seeing the soft focus on her face and seeing the life being pressed out of her. That stays with me, and I can't. And it's not like showy at all.
They do the same kind of shot in Suspiria with the face on the glass,
which is totally on my list. I mean, for showy.
But that's proof positive. It doesn't have to be gory if you like the person, if you care about them. That primal image of her being dispatched in that manner, it doesn't have to be gory.
And it's surprising. The image is surprising and it's personal. That's up close. Had it been a knife going to her, wouldn't have been surprising.
Knife is personal for the person killing.
Yeah.
But what you're doing is personal for the person being killed.
Yeah.
Which is when in the original Halloween, for me, it's Bob when he gets knifed right through the chest. I think it's because he's struggling and the knife goes in and he just stops. It's focused on his face and he just stops moving. And then, of course, it's the great shot of Michael kind of looking at him and all that. To me, that's the most effective, amazing shot of the whole movie, of that one. But what about the franchise? Does anyone care about the Halloween stuff?
Well, I mean, there's fun deaths, although after, like, number 2 has some fun stuff in the jacuzzi.
My favorite thing in 2 is the jacuzzi, although that's from Deep Red, which I never knew. The whole
and Halloween
drowning.
3 has its own different thing.
I'll go to another jacuzzi that I threw in there was from Valentine, when she's stuck in the jacuzzi. Another sort of, maybe I have a drowning thing right now, but that
was it Denise Richards?
It was Denise Richards. And then they're drilling in, and then he just throws it and electrocutes her.
That actually has some pretty good standalone murder scenes.
It does. That's why I threw it in there, because, you know what? It's not a good movie, but it's a good sequence.
Yeah, I haven't seen it since theater, and I'd probably
revisit it. It's better. It's funny seeing that late 90s movies because they're not like, I remember like when they were coming, I was like, ugh. And now you watch them and you're like, they have that aesthetic from that time period where you're like, oh, it's actually pretty cool. I like this.
Were there any
they spent money. They were actually expending money to do it, which is why they feel like in hindsight, like, wow, this is well done, well made.
Were there any of those that you ever, during the period where you're writing a Final Destination movies, where you looked around and go, oh, I would have liked to have taken a shot at that franchise over there? Or was there anything else happening that you were
it was between me and Platinum Dunes for Friday the 13th. So I had watched all the movies. Mark Wheaton was the guy who had done the original draft, and I knew Mark for years. So I was all over New Line and back and forth, and came up with a bunch of takes and approach. And I watched all the movies in one weekend. When I said I got a shot, I watched literally from beginning to start. And what I learned from that experience is that there are some not very good movies in that franchise. But that interesting, the first one is kind of a weird little masterclass in how to generate suspense with nothing. And it's they just really did a good job of using the resources they had to make it compelling and keep it interesting. And because it was sort of like the baseline for all the tropes that sort of fueled the next 20 years, in looking at it, I'm like, it's not a great movie, but the math is solid. The math in this movie is solid. So if we're trying to like go back, if we want to make like the last 3 movies, don't go back to the original and say, why did that work? What is it about the original that worked? It's the math. Now you have to augment that with a contemporary kill approach, but you just have to look at how do you do suspense, because all of those kills happen really fast. They're punctuations on the sentences of all of that
because they can't show the person doing it
exactly,
and
they have to hide it. So it was a wholly different aesthetic, and people keep forgetting, why that franchise landed, and it landed because that worked.
I saw that trailer recently where it went through every single death. Yeah. 1, 2, 3, and you're just like, wow, what a crazy campaign.
Didn't see the movies.
And to me, that's the only negative about some of these movies is that I wasn't there before. Like I was at Friday 13th when it came on TV when I'm a kid or whatever, but I would have loved to have known what it was like to have been seeing that in the theater for the first time, not having a concept of the words Friday 13th meaning what it means.
Yeah, I mean, to me,
I can tell you, because I was there.
Yeah.
It was all that magical year of 1979
to 80.
It was terrifying. It was terrifying because it was they had no money. They had to actually play it real. They couldn't gussy it up. It felt dirty, and it felt like you were sort of witnessing something you should. Particularly since people walk around in underwear when you're 11 years old is an exciting thing.
Yeah.
But then they all get killed. The way they get killed. So once it transitions into something that is spectacle. Right. It becomes less compelling.
I had a real problem with the Platinum Dunes remake for that, just because I feel like I'm watching stuff happen. I'm not in it.
Correct. It was spectacle. It was well shot. But how about this? Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the remake, I thought it was pretty good, actually.
Yeah, it was solid.
But it was more spectacle and trick shots than anything else.
Yeah.
What was your favorite Friday, since you had to watch all of them?
Honestly, it was. I have to say, it was the first one because
really?
It was so
You're
pure.
the first person to ever say that.
But the reason why is that I saw it. I saw it in theaters when I was a kid, and it had that impact. And because I think it had that impact when I was a kid, it became lesser and lesser. And I appreciated it too, narratively. I appreciated it. I appreciated the things that happened. But after 4, it just started to become like a fucking step and fetch it show. It got silly to me. And the kills were just there for the grand guignol of it, not for the actual psychology of it.
And you were going to do, your remake was going to follow Shelley's son in the future, just so we can get Larry in there again.
No, it was going to be a cross with The Martian.
So what titles did we miss on everybody's list?
You guys must have done Kirk and Texas Chainsaw, right? First one.
Well, that was I have that on the list. That fucked me up.
I wonder if I might say that might be. I might be the number. Or even just being grabbed might be my favorite horror moment in a movie, where I'm just like,
so great.
It's between him and Pam. Getting hung up on the hook. Those two are so. I can't decide which one.
I think for me, the shock of the door opening and the way it moves and just this thing coming out, it's so just out
to me,
there.
it's the hit, and then his legs start.
It's like
the twitch.
Oh God!
Which is so somebody who's been at a slaughterhouse.
Slamming of the door at the end.
Yeah.
And then the music kicks in.
Yeah,
There's no music.
that is a masterclass scene.
So good
in that, and I really love the opening sequence of the opening death of Suspiria. I think that's just it's so
the whole sequence.
It's so different than anything that you could make. There's so many otherworldly parts of it. Eyes appearing, the hand comes in that's hairy, but then you run down. And then there's hanging. There's like that's like a whole different level, like weird filmmaking.
Yeah,
that's
Argento's specialty.
Well, I'm glad we had this episode for me to have to go back and remember all the brilliant things about Argento, because like the last 10-15 years it's just so kind of besides the opening of the Mother of Tears, which has that one great scene, but it's just like going back and thinking about him, you're like, oh man, there is so much great stuff in there. And he's like the most interesting non-narrative filmmaker. The story kills him,
Yeah, when I was teaching the horror of history, or the history of horror class, I think it was at VCU.
By the way, that works too, the horror of history.
Either one, really.
It's happening.
I don't even remember which college I was at during this time. It was either Hunter or VCU, but I was in a lecture hall class of like 100 and some kids. And I showed the very first film I show as like an intro to the horror world is Suspiria. And on the first day, a girl passed out and started having seizures during that opening segment because it was like so vivid and wild. And she wasn't epileptic. She'd never had seizures before in her life.
Crazy.
But like, I see this, like we're watching the movie and all of a sudden this is the first day of class. I hear this, Miss McKendry, the girl's on the floor next to me, and I had to like flip on the lights and call the paramedics. Like,
oh my God.
It was crazy, but
there's nothing quite like it.
I still start with that movie.
And the way it uses score and imagery that is non-realistic. to create a feeling that's different.
Not even a kill, but the imagery
and design.
The eyes.
Long before I saw it was that image of opera with the needles.
Oh, yeah, that's amazing.
And you're just like,
that's his last great film. I mean, that's actually is a great film. Opera is a really strong movie. There's weird stuff.
Well,
in it,
we already mentioned Fulci, zombie, the eye violence, but and a far worse fate than this character deserved, I thought. But in City of the Living Dead, when the guy gets the drill put through his head, and I just recently revisited that on Blu-ray, and you watch it and you're like, how'd they do that? Because it looks like that drill is going straight through that dude's skull and coming out the other end. Like,
well, also the other one is the eye, where you get forced back into Beyond, where the guy comes out of the bathtub.
Oh, yeah.
And he like forces it back, and the eye goes back through the...
Right, and it pops out, and they hold for like an extra beat longer with his eyeball dangling.
Yeah, Fulci, he's so good at, the strength of the Italians were when they kind of go non-narrative. They go to this weird, ephemeral, like...
So weird.
And to the point where
it's
somehow
like the Beyond,
us, Yeah, it's like, you were talking about safety. It's an unsafe place. Like anything could happen in this weird place with you guys, City
of the Dead, puking up the innards.
Yeah, that one
just messed me up. Yeah,
that one was pretty
That
intense.
whole movie, I've been revisiting a lot of Fulci stuff on Blu-ray, and I rewatched that one not too long ago. And what's interesting, it's the most unique zombie movie ever because they're kind of like, they're not like zombies that rise from the grave and then come after you. It's like this whole thing about the priest killing himself and opening this gate to hell. Right. And like there's that bar sequence where all of a sudden these zombies just appear. So they're kind of like ghosts, like ghost zombies. And,
it's non-narrative.
Shit just
happens. It's dream logic.
Well, they also don't
puking the guts and stuff. I find that terrifying. There's
that film, I think that
also,
film's actually his masterpiece. Like, because I love the Beyond stuff, but when I really think about it, I think City of the Living is the one where you're like, God, this is a nightmare.
You're uncomfortable because you can't get firm ground. You're never on solid ground.
The zombies in Beyond kind of irk me because they never really figure out how to get them. Like, no matter how many head kills actually take them down, they're still like, I'll shoot his kneecap again.
Just keep
like they never get it.
Exploding is just fantastic. I think.
Well, talking about zombies, I mean, to me, the most obviously I think my introduction to Romero, it was Day of the Dead because I was really young. That was 85 or whatever.
85.
And it's some of the most amazing work from Savini. But the two things that stand out to me, number one is the one zombie that's autopsied and split open. And then he gets up and everything just starts spilling over. So they immediately run over and put the drill right in his forehead. And it's like, I know the gag is a simple gag. It's just like a retractable blade or whatever. But it's just so, you've never seen anything that gory and open like in a movie. They're like, oh my God. And of course, Rhodes. I mean, that's the one that's been, he's getting pulled apart literally and screaming, choke on it.
But also the earlier death, it's also so matter of fact. Like, it's like that and how it was done. It just, that's equally disturbing. And then it was well done because when all the guts come out, you're like, wait, he's empty. How did he do it? He's empty there.
Yeah.
I wanted two others I wanted to mention because they're actually two of my favorite. And it was when I was looking back at Argento, I don't want to spoil it. So if you haven't seen Deep Red, but the ending of Deep Red, that's all I'll say with the necklace it's just unbelievable. Like Hitchcock would have just jerked the fuck off to that because Hitchcock, deep down, Hitchcock wanted to do that shit. He wanted to show that shit. He just knew that he couldn't. And towards the end, he tried with that one movie that didn't get made. And I think Argento kind of goes where he stopped himself. But my favorite, like number one with a bullet, and it was actually at the top of my list, not the best ever because I think Texas Chainsaw is the best ever, but at the top is Tenebrae with the arm being cut. Because the build-up is so freaking good. I think that's his best film.
And by the way, it keeps going. Like the amount of blood pumping.
But it's that amazing like
red on white
wall, and like this is the starkness of this red just painting
so
this
good.
wall.
I really think that's one of the just best moments in a movie.
Synapse Films cannot put out those Blu-rays fast enough. I know they're taking forever, but I cannot wait.
Well, we got to see that before Goblin again. So I got to see Tenebrae again before Goblin played. So the whole movie again, and just watching it again made me go. Even though I love Suspiria more because it's just so unnarrative and weird. Tenebrae, I just go. I think this might be your best movie, man.
Tenebrae.
Like I think you just made a great fucking slasher. And
actually, I had a Rebekah moment with a combination of Anaconda and Deep Rising with the digestive, regurgitative moments.
Oh my gosh, yes. I love both those movies.
Isn't a dude sucked into a toilet in one scene?
That's the Blob. No, the Blob is the drain.
And that's
a whole other thing. That's on my list.
Blob remake where the guy gets pulled into the drain.
Fantastic.
When I saw that again at the theater, I literally, it's one of the only deaths I've ever seen in my life where I have no idea. I look and go, I don't know how you did that. That was like magic trick. You guys just did it. You did a magic trick. It's great. And Frank at the end of Hellraiser, I think that's one of the
Oh,
most
yeah, yeah.
meaningful deaths.
That's a given. Really quickly, there was a period kind of in the beginning of Icons of Fright, like 2004, and then actually more towards the late 2000s, where I really loved what all these newer filmmakers are doing. So like, shout out to the movie Crypt, Hatchet. Like I actually really love the first time Victor Crowley comes out and hacks poor Richard Riley and then goes over and splits open his wife's head like a walnut. It's one of those amazing things. And I remember them showing it at a Fangoria Weekend of Horrors and just everyone being blown away. Because, if you know filmmaking, you watch, it's a big, 360 turn around it and you're like, oh, there's the cut, right? You don't notice the cut, but there's a cut where it becomes a puppet and it gets split open. So there was that. And then I love the way Joe Lynch opened up Wrong Turn 2.
Yeah, sure.
I thought that was great. And if you know him, you know that was obviously all him. 2001 Maniacs, the Tim Sullivan's remake of the Herschel
I've never
Gordon
seen
Lewis.
It's
It's
okay.
it's fun. It's fun and funny. But there's a great kill. There's a moment like where
Easy Caesar.
there's a lot of good kills, but there's one where one of the main girls gets tied up all four limbs to four separate horses. And then the character, what's his name? I forget the name of the guy, but essentially he whips all four and they all four go running off in different directions.
Isn't that in the original?
I think it might be.
2000 Maniacs.
But the way they do it in the remake is just amazing. Like, it's
Okay.
like
What about
The original.
gory and amazing.
throwing out subsections? What about recent films last like 5 to 10 years? Like for me, one of our favorites from a guest on our film, and it was because of the surprise nature of it, was when AJ shoots the babysitter in House of the Devil. I think that moment
that's
is
great.
so great, and the effect they got is so. And it's Greta Gerwig who goes on to become like the voice of a whole generation of girls. I just love something about that scene. I really it worked for
That
me
is
so
great.
well
That is
as a
great.
horror beat. Like it just without, and I saw that word before knowing any of these people. That was a great one. I'm trying to think. In your next, I really liked Amy Simons as well because she's ready.
It's
She's
pretty-
a
it's
track and
funny.
field star, ready to go run, and you're just dead. Without trying to give away spoilers, I use sound effects. But are there others from the last few years where you've noticed and go, oh, because there's not a lot that I've noticed in the last few years I feel is particularly creative in that way. But
I mean, it's older, but the dad getting the head taken off by the furniture inside and in high tension.
High tension.
that's on my
Yeah.
list too. I think the furniture deaths in that were brutal.
Yeah, those were pretty amazing.
But also inside. I mean, the whole French New Wave,
those are
Frontiers, inside, all that.
They're pushing that.
They really went to they went the distance on that one. Inside with the scissors,
I know.
We'll stop.
I know.
We'll
What?
stop.
What?
Yeah, I don't
I've
know.
only
La la
watched
la
some-
la la la.
Hey, Inside's a Christmas movie. Just saying.
Yeah.
Yes.
Those are
Holiday
maybe
classic.
visit it.
I mean, they're hardcore, not quite as hardcore as the boxing clown and killer clowns where Pitts the
You know what? I love that.
I do too.
What are you going to knock my block?
I
have a real
put down the
soft spot for that
basketball from Deadly Friend.
Yep,
so-
that's there
Basketball
too.
Deadly Friend is amazing.
But for
Yeah.
recent ones, the number one for me, like in terms of like a director who, and this is controversial in terms of whether you like the movie, but the person I feel like Fede, whatever his name is,
Fede Alvarez.
I
Evil-
put that down
Evil
too.
Dead Ring, the viscera that he was able to make me, not viscera, the ability to make me feel the hits with the nail
In
gun.
Evil-
I don't even know if the nails ended up killing that character because he got killed so many different ways. But that character, when he was getting nail gunned, I felt every one of those hits. And
Yeah.
I don't remember and when the girl's head hit a
The toilet,
bowl,
that was
I felt
intense.
the hit. And that's rare in recent
Yeah.
films for me.
I think that's a function of sound design.
No, it is.
It is.
But
Yeah, no, it
and
works.
direction.
Yeah, and
Direction.
100%.
And
yes.
characters. But I know what you mean. I think the sound's the thing that's like selling you on that.
Yeah.
I was remembering that movie this weekend because I was talking about watching horror films while I'm pregnant. I remembered that we saw that. Elric and
Yeah,
I
with
saw that
Leanne.
together with Leanne, and it was a group of us, and we had sushi right beforehand because I couldn't eat sushi because I was pregnant. But we saw that on my
Well, the real important
due
part
date.
is I was meant to be watching this movie with Quentin Tarantino,
I know,
who I
and he
never get to
didn't
meet
show up.
because they stopped being friends. and he came to the door. He's like, yeah, the thing is, I'm not going to go on right now because in a couple years I have to do a Brett Easton Ellis show. But that's cool. You guys have fun. I'm
But
going to
then
show
he
him
gave, us
70
a,
Totally on our
he
podcast,
gave us
damn
a
it.
scarf and sent us on our
It
way.
really upset me, but I still like the movie.
As we were,
I just mentally cut to Elric with the scarf going,
Pretty much.
that's pretty much it. Like he showed up at the
fetishizing.
door, gave us a scarf, and then we were on
Pretty
our
much how it
way.
went. But, what do
it
you
was
do?
on my original due date for Marnie, and I remember walking in, and the
God,
publicist
you saw that
on my
your
due date. Yeah, because I
and
wasn't
it didn't
like,
trigger.
No, and that
We
was
were
the thing is,
hoping.
we were walking in, and the publicist was a friend of mine, and he leans over and he goes, "I really fucking hope you go into labor. I want to
Yes.
put that in the marketing
yeah.
materials." And I was like, "Oh, I hope I do too.
I can see
really
you like
sick of being pregnant.
pouring your drink. Oh no! Look what has happened to me.
No, by that point I was like I'm so sick of this being pregnant thing, and I was like, please just send me. It didn't.
Do you guys have De Palma ones?
I have Dress to Kill.
Yeah, that's with
in
Angie
the-
in the
yeah.
elevator. Angie
Yeah.
Dickinson. That one's great. Body Double, the Driller Killer, or the Indian. Just because of the way because the way you're watching it, it's because it's like Rear Window, the way it's put out there. And I have a weird one, a movie I did not like at all of his, but it has one of the best sequences. And if anyone, you should almost watch it just for the sequence. It's probably like, you know how he's always trying to achieve like pure opera, like Black Dahlia. There's a scene on the staircase, and a killer runs up, and they follow someone, and you don't know who the characters are, and then somebody like gets slashed, and then they fall down like a huge staircase into they get kind of impaled. And I remember watching that going, oh, I don't like this movie at all in terms of the character stuff. It's just kind of bullshit. But that sequence is worth watching that movie for. It is like pure, like brilliant spectacle. De Palma, like at his A game. But you know, and the Fury, you know, you get the big crazy. But I do feel like he's like, sometimes he's just like the whole movie for a set piece that he's trying to.
If there was ever a guy who gets in front of his skis, it's Brian De Palma.
It totally is.
Well, he was supposed to direct Truman Show. We had a bunch of meetings with him back in the day. And this was when it was not set in a little residential area in Florida. It was in Manhattan.
That would have been a completely different movie.
It would have been expensive, you'd think.
That's why it's in a smaller community in Florida.
Instead, they went with an Aussie.
There you go.
Good director, Peter Weir.
Yes.
Wow.
But no, he's an interesting one. I don't know if you guys had other ones of his.
Can I mention just a weird one? I think Peeping Tom.
Yeah.
All of Peeping
the final
Tom.
Death.
Yes.
There's one where there's projection happening, and he goes up to the girl. He puts the.
I kind of went for the entire movie because it was so avant-garde for the time and destroyed his career in many ways.
Yeah.
Michael Powell.
Michael Powell. And the other guy whose name is not Preminger, but what's the other guy who directed with his partner?
Emil Pressburg.
Pressburg, thank you.
Powell Pressburg.
Yeah, but
the red
that
shoes they'd made these like
right. But that movie was just destroyed. His career left her and never recovered. But that movie now was so prescient as to how people look, the look
such a
of
creepy
movies.
performance too.
Exactly.
There's one that me and Rob both like that. I'm glad I remember before I got here because I think it's one of the best in the last few years. Beneath. By Larry Fessenden. One scene that Hitchcock would have gone, yes, you know, where the rope just keeps going round and round. And it's also a character, once again, it was a character you weren't expecting to die.
Yeah.
Because he's kind of the, you know.
Yeah, you're like, spoilers. Oh shit.
And people bitch so much about that one because it wasn't the fish doing it.
Yeah.
But that's
why it's interesting.
Yeah.
I actually think the fish effects on that were pretty darn good.
They did
a great job.
Like a good
compared to like
fish.
sci-fi movies where it's on sci-fi, that's much more engaging.
I haven't seen Pod. Is Pod?
I talked about it
The
earlier.
effects are decent at the end. It's Jeff Farley.
It's in the queue.
Yeah, it's on Netflix Instant now, so I'm going to check it out
Listen to
this
the
week.
start of the show before you got here.
It's kind of a mixed bag.
Hey, listen back to your
Craig.
own voice. Hey, as a New Zealander, the most important death scene in the history of cinema is the exploding sheep in Bad Taste, where the missile launcher goes through the door's all open, he misses all his targets, and then you see a little sheep and goes, and then it's like that. As a kid, killed everyone in our whole country.
I can't believe you didn't say baby through the head.
No,
from
look, everything in Brain Dead is
Dead Alive.
Brain Dead. Everything in Brain
Dead
Dead is amazing, and I miss that guy. Wherever you are, PJ, watch that movie again, and please come back.
You know, it's funny because obviously
genius.
Dead Alive has 8 million kills that you can pick. My favorite is actually Uncle Les.
Oh yeah,
the terrible guy, because it ends up being a shadow where he sees the giant mother, and it's his shadow, and it's like his skull gets pulled out with the fucking spinal column behind it and everything. So like that's one of my
what I
favorites.
mean. He's so freaking creative back then.
Yeah.
Like he takes what he loved about Reanimator.
Your mother ate my dog.
One of the
Jackson.
best lines in history of film. You know?
Peter, we know you listen. We want you back.
I'm a Wellington Zoo official, and this monkey's going to Newtown with the machine gun and stuff. No, but it's just so smart. And look, that the one with the lawnmower is just so good, and the test and
Oh god, that whole
it's
sequence.
just so good.
I remember I showed that to a college. I was in a college class with I think about film, and like everybody had to bring in like a clip from movies and stuff. And I brought in clips from Dead Alive, and I was like, "Hey, this is the guy that's about to direct Lord of the Rings. Watch this." And I showed them the lawnmower scene, and like everybody got sick.
Yeah,
in
you
class.
would never believe it.
I saw it at a distributor screening for the U.S. and then I got the uncut version from ICM because my buddy was working there at the time. and showed that on an endless loop at the Silver Pictures offices.
Yeah. How cut was the version
I
you
kick
saw?
ass for the Lord. There's
Lord.
not much. There was some stuff that's different. I think I still have a digitized version of that somewhere. But
the cool thing is in New Zealand, that's like theatrical. Like we're all going to see that, and the whole country's going to that movie. I mean, not the people who didn't like horror, but that was crazy to think.
Deathgasm.
Yeah,
Same kind of thing.
Yeah.
Funny,
but
gory.
times have changed. Like, no, the movies Housebound and Deathgasm definitely are taking a lot from his spirit lives on, which is nice.
Last few I want to mention it really quickly. The original "I Spit on Your Grave," the castration scene, I think is one of the most shocking.
Hot,
and kind of hot deaths of ever. Hot, baby.
You said it, Rebekah. I didn't.
Hot.
You just said it twice. I didn't say.
If we're talking slashers, the once again Tom Savini, The Burning, the boat massacre in The Burning is pretty out of control.
I watched that just because I remember people talking about it. And I went on YouTube. It's there.
Yeah.
I don't know. It didn't land for me this time. It didn't.
I'm not a big fan of that film to begin with.
It's Blu-ray. It's not forgiving.
Yes.
None of Savini's work on Blu-ray.
But the thing, I appreciate the sheer volume of kills.
Yes,
but I didn't think any of them. It kept in this and then kill.
Yeah.
This and then kill. It just got to this weird rhythmic thing that didn't have that sort of shock left. Oh my God, this happened. And you cut to her screaming. It was this weird cyclical thing in how they edited it. It didn't land for me, but I understand its merits in the historiography.
Yeah, I think it's one of those just like what the fuck moments in early 80s.
It makes absolutely no physical sense whatsoever.
I didn't
Where did it come from? How did this work?
If you were 12, it would have scarred you.
I didn't see The Burning until the Fancy Schmantz Scream Factory release, and when I finally watched it, I was like, I don't get the hype.
You know the writers on it, right?
I do.
What about, you got a couple other, but what about, do you have a favorite Christmas franchise, Death, like Silent Night, any of those movies? Linnea Quigley's pretty good.
Linnea Quigley with the deer antlers is pretty great in the first one. I mean, I'm biased. I love two, so Garbage Day is
Garbage Day.
Not
so much about
Although
the
actually,
death
I think
the
the umbrella thing is actually the best kill, like the best and most hilarious kill in that movie.
Yeah, those don't like none of the in terms of death scenes. Besides the first one, they don't really.
They're not as memorable. No, definitely not.
I fully admitted I did not see Krampus, not yet.
I haven't either.
Gotta go.
I'm seeing it Friday.
I know. Bad Dogs,
fun.
Supposed to be good.
Yeah, I think you'd have fun.
Yeah, must see it. Must see it. This is my last one for now. Obviously, we can go on and on, but because of the experience I had seeing it, and again, I think I might have brought this up in the show. You have to put into context that this was in cinemas at the time, but Hannibal, Ridley Scott's Hannibal, Ray Liotta getting the top of his head popped off with his brain being fed to him. I mean, people in I saw an advanced screening of it about a week or two before it came out, and people were losing their minds. And literally they were screaming.
In their mouth.
Yeah. They were literally screaming and going nuts. And the punchline of that story is that me and my buddy Jay went to that screening, and we were in the same row as Stephen King and his son, Joe Hill. We were sitting two people down from him. And while, literally, everyone's like, like screaming when that happened. Yeah. There was only 3 people smiling. Me, my buddy Jay, and we looked over and Stephen King. He was smiling. Awesome. And then a week later, there was a quote from him in Entertainment Weekly since he did so much stuff for them. And he's like, I really liked Hannibal, but it is in poor taste. And I just remember, I just imagined him making that quote
has to be in poor taste
while
for you?
Smiling during Ray Liotta's scene in that movie. But again, because of that was something, a big Hollywood movie on a big scale, really pushing the boundaries of what people, the general public would take.
Sleazy. It was like reading something that would have been in a sleazy horror novel.
It was like reading The Galleys for American Psycho, which I did have to read The Galleys and be like, what is this fucking thing? Oh my God.
Actually, we talk about best of, but this is actually favorite, personal. If you go to the thing that you personally think, I think this is one of the best openings of any movie ever. I'm only bringing it up because it's being mentioned a lot today. The first time I saw Pieces, I believe Pieces as a whole film has entertainment value, but I'm a kind of a believer that, the ending's great and the start's great. The start is one of the best openings to any movie. I honestly believe that. I think it's something so interesting about it, and it's so voyeuristic, but when he comes out with that axe, it is powerful. I just think that's a great murder scene.
Pieces coming soon on Blu-ray.
On Blu-ray.
Can't wait.
And then in terms of shitty ones, I do want to mention one shitty movie because it's coming out soon on Blu-ray, and I am dying to see it because when I watched this movie, The only scene in it I remember just loving, and it's such a shitty death that goes on forever, is the Mutilator. And there's one character who comes around the corner and he's killed by a chainsaw, and he just keeps showing his face going, oh, and it just goes on, and there's blood everywhere. On Blu-ray, that's going to look
I can't
crazy.
wait.
Like, it's not a good movie.
Like
it kind of suffers from what you were saying about the burning, like just death, But it's going to be fun to watch.
Can't wait.
As a beautiful film, yeah. Any other big ones
because the movie really meant a lot to me because it was the first time there was a slasher film that was intelligent and had thematic resonance. Was Candyman had a lot of impact on me. When the therapist gets killed in Candyman, and all of a sudden he just goes forth and he's right behind and just bisects him in front of her. That was both shocking. It was, again, resonant, and it was on point for what the character, where she was in the story. That one really,
you know what I think it is.
Go ahead.
Well, people always talk about the slasher thing. Can you bring it back? But maybe you're onto something, which is the supernatural slasher is the only thing that can really shock you because you're in the real world. It can't happen. Then suddenly it's happening. Same with Freddy and same with Candyman.
Well, that's I've always had this argument with people. I just think that, to me, a horror movie needs some element of the supernatural or otherness or otherworldliness, because otherwise it's just a thriller. I don't consider Silence of the Lambs to be a horror movie. It's a thriller. It's a procedural thriller. Yeah. I'm sorry. There's nothing else to it. You see the same shit on any TV show on CBS, CSI.
Yeah.
So unless there's that little sprinkling of supernatural, even Halloween, there's something about how he disappears and reappears and what he says, that Donald Pleasance says that he's evil. That gives it the allowance to be on unstable ground for the rest of that movie.
Because, again, you're not in a safe place. It's not really possible. It challenges your mental state.
Right.
Yep.
All these things. But yeah, it's interesting. That was interesting. Good that you touch on that. And then there's movies like Society that I love. People being turned inside out.
Something about possession.
If I'm going to say it, would be Sam Neill killing.
Thank you for playing our game. We've actually crossed the Rubicon.
We can cross all of those. Have you seen that film?
I've not seen that.
Oh, God.
Mandate?
Huh?
Can we do it?
We can do it.
I'll show you that, and it follows.
I'd spin my hand and shake, but that'd be awkward, even more awkward than now.
When does your wife leave town?
Oh, God, I don't know.
I'll wear something.
As an owner of the fancy Blu-ray, I would like to host this mandate.
I do too.
Done. Sold.
As long as I can bring mine to your house.
Let's do it.
And you can give birth while we do it.
I will give birth.
Because that wouldn't be awkward at all.
No. I will hang out in the background and just be like, I'm cool, guys. It's cool.
Well, I just want to say thank you guys for having me. I'm a huge fan. I appreciate what you do for the community. I appreciate you do for the fans, and I appreciate what you do for the genre. So thank you.
Equally, we love you, and thank you for coming on.
Especially if you make a part 6. We'll love you.
Please, from your lips.
Name 3 characters after us.
That'd be fun.
Elric
Done.
Easy as Kane.
Yes.
Thanks for coming on.
Thanks so much, Carter.
Thank you, guys.
We will see you guys next week. It's our top 10
Top 10
of the years.
I think so.
Top 10.
Of the
Here we go.
years. All of them.
We'll have a 6.
It's going to be a big episode.
Bye, guys.